Catherine, you gonna send us another link for the second part of the meeting, or is that the same link?
It's the same link, right, Alyssa?
We'll just keep on this link?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's correct.
thanks.
Is it raining at your house, Jonathan?
It is coming down. Yes.
My cats.
Yes.
Tony Hershey, good to see you.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi.
Union Creek.
Well, it's only a little bit.
Yeah.
We either aren't getting it or it's going to come this way. But, you know, sometimes we don't kind of get what Glenwood does. So I don't know.
Yeah, you're so far away.
There's just a division on that piece. Hey, Catherine or Alyssa that's on, I'm going over to my PowerPoint and I can't seem to get it to go on the slide, you know, open up on the slide. I should be able to, right? Without.
Are you looking at it?
It's because my screen is being shared right now, and as I'm the host, it won't let you share over me. But as soon as I stop, you'll be able to share.
Yeah, but not even sharing. It just won't let me make. I was thinking it would let me have it as a full video here, but maybe it won't until I get the screen share. I think I'm going to turn it. I'm going to close it out and bring it up one more time.
All right. Are we live?
Frozen.
All right, everybody, let's call this meeting to order. It is 5:31. Today is July 22nd, Wednesday. This is a work session.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, hi, Deborah. Catherine, could you take a roll call?
Willman,
Here.
Voorhees,
He's dark.
I
am here.
Cow,
Here.
Rodas,
Here.
Davis,
He said he wouldn't be here tonight.
Step,
Here.
Hershey.
here for this work session. Yes.
All right. Tonight, our work session is strategies to address housing and homelessness. So we have been working with Debbie Wild and talking about different things that we can do over the last, I think we've been working with you, Debbie, for almost a year.
I think so.
And if for the public that's here watching, Debbie is a longtime nonprofit leader in our community. She did Youth Zone as their executive director for many years, and now does, I think, this kind of stuff, consulting, nonprofit consulting and community building. So Debbie, we'll just turn it over to you right now.
Wonderful. I've got a great crew here. Now, interestingly enough, it would seem like I think my PowerPoint has frozen. So Christina, I'm going to try to line up, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to call on you. Let's see. I can share it, but for some reason it was moving, but let's see, will it move for me? No, it will not. And I tried to reload it. So let me get
there
out.
it is. No, you have it.
Yeah,
You're
but
good.
see, it won't move, right? It's stuck.
Oh.
Stuck, and I can't even close it out and bring up a new one. So Christina, are you there? Or Jen, if Christina's not. Jen, you got the slide deck, Nan's got it. I had this backup with several just in case anything went.
I just promoted Christina Gare. If it's Christina Gare, if that's the
Yeah.
Christina we're looking at, I just promoted her
is.
to panelist.
Great.
So she should-
Hello.
Hi, Christina.
Yeah, she should be.
Yep,
Christina,
I can
will
pull
you-
it up.
Great, thanks. I had it all prepared, but it's frozen on my end.
It happens.
Yeah. I did prepare all my panelists too, like if I have an internet burp. It's somehow, I've been having some of those, it seems like in the evening, but
That's because you live in Canyon Creek.
exactly.
Phone
I
call
need
from
to be, I need to get within the city limits so I can have really good things. Okay, Christina, yeah, if you want to go through the slide deck, and bring it up as a slides and I will kind of tell you when to move it.
Okay. Can you guys all see it correctly?
Not now, it was there. Okay,
Debbie, should we introduce your team?
yeah, I will do that. I will do that as I have it all set up here if I get to the right things. Okay, if you want to move to the next slide. So really, we're talking about strategies to address housing and homelessness. And one of the things that we're asking people who are involved is, and maybe are joining us from the public, is put comments and questions in the chat. And we'll try to address those at the end of this. Council members, we're keeping this to 45 minutes or less. We're asking to probably just go through the presentation and then open it up to questions. And of course, you're first in line for that, but we'll try to get through some of these pieces here. And so that will be how we'll ask at the end. The ask here is for people to contribute to a regional strategy to address housing and homelessness. So also people can type their name in the chat with their contact that we can put them on that list. And we can get that, right? Catherine or whoever's running that technology piece of it. I think we'll get that after. Okay, Christina. The Built for Xero team is a group of people in the region, and Built for Xero is part of what I'm representing the city on that team. And some of us have been trained in this national model. You've heard from me, city council folks, about Built for Xero before, but the idea of just a model and a way to approach homelessness. So also tonight, besides myself, Marion McDonough from Catholic Charities, who's the director there, will be a panelist. Nan Sundin, the director of Pickens County Human Services, and Christina Gare, who's the director of West Mountain Regional Health Alliance. And they will all have some things to share. So our featured presenter and who we're bringing in to sort of share with us is Jen Lopez, and she's on. And she's worked throughout the state in housing and homelessness for over the past 20 years. She's a resident of Durango, has really worked with Durango on their strategies. And that's what's very interesting. First of all, Jen is just a real go-getter on all this and has so much to add, but she also comes from Durango, which we can see some similarities with Glenwood and our area. So that was really looking at. And we really want to do just a special shout out to all the amazing people who work directly with homelessness in our region. So we want to acknowledge that. Certainly the few of us that are speaking tonight are only a few of what's happening in our area and people who have very passionate or dedicated time. This evening is a bigger picture. It's a macro look at housing and homelessness. Christina? So our goals tonight were to inform and learn and develop, and informing in a brief overview of current and local efforts regarding housing for the homeless. And of course, we're not taking on the whole housing issue, but we are having some particular focus on homelessness, right? People without a house. Learning about Durango's journey and their strategy, and outlining steps to develop solutions that work for us. And that's kind of our attempt here. And Built for Xero team members are going to share more about this, and as well as we'll take a look also at Pickens County. Christina, so some premises of what this is: a learning opportunity. This is not an all-inclusive information session about housing and homelessness by any means. It is a complex issue. It is an opportunity to learn from other communities about their collective response to housing and homelessness and related matters. It's kind of nice. People go before us. They've had some bumps and we can learn from that. We are not the only ones, obviously, going through all this, right? So It is not, homelessness is not an innate characteristic of a person, but it is an experience. And this really becomes so true when somebody tries to say, how many homeless do we have? And when Marion talks about that a little later, it is at the moment in time when you talk about the homeless count that you have in your community. But the variety and complexity that underlies a person or family not having a roof over their heads is vast. And to even begin to try to understand or address this without acknowledging that uniqueness is to guarantee frustration and a lack of any change. So, I mean, one of the first parts is like you break it into little pieces, right? So starting with these basic premises of that we've kind of just put out there, that's what tonight is about, just to share and gather some information to shed some light on some things we've learned. A lot of learning has happened around our country on this issue because it really is an issue. This is not a proposal for any particular action. It is a call to create a space for collaboration among all those interested and concerned with housing and homelessness. So you'll hear us at the end of this and throughout saying a call for that collaborative effort. Christina? A regional strategy seems to be the real key here. Fairness across places, that all people, regardless of where their community is, right, deserve affordable homes and other viable resources. And that regional interdependence is really important. It's all communities within a region need resources such as the availability of good homes in order to prosper. And we know that so much so for our regional piece, we are very much independent or interdependent, and the needs for housing in one part of the region and the needs for work in another, and so the story goes. So we are really delighted at the Built for Zero level and continuum of care, some of the areas working on homelessness, that we really do have some regional work, and you'll hear some of that. Nan Sundin being here tonight from Pitkin County is a real great piece about that. So in our regional strategy, Pitkin has a stability coalition, a housing stability coalition that they created in the fall of 2018. And Nan will talk just a little bit about that and how, because of having the coalition, they really have some clear strategy. And that's been a critical piece of opening them up to dollars that we have not accessed, but that Pitkin County has. A clear idea of where to go, where they're going. Garfield, we have programs and services, but we don't have a kind of a coordinated community response. And that's one of the things we feel like is a real need for us. Eagle, kind of like us, sort of exploring things. So Pitkin has created a framework, which is a great piece that we can tweak and modify for ourselves. And we just don't have to start any of this from the ground up, because it really is happening in communities around us, in the state, in the nation next door. Christina? The key goals, a little bit hard for you to read all that there, maybe on the screen. That these are goals also from the Colorado Department of Local Affairs Division of Housing, and they really work for us. We've gone over these really carefully, but to make things fairly simple, if you would, and not get down in the weeds with stuff, is just stop homelessness before it starts. And this goal and key piece is one of the efforts you've seen happen with COVID. It's going to become more and more critical as we go into the next months. Identify individuals at risk and ensure that they are safe. That also has a new meaning to it with the COVID environment that we're in, but even just that. Connect people with solutions they need to quickly exit homelessness, and create access to long-term structural solutions. So that's the pieces that we're looking about. Now, don't think that we won't forget about the fact that, part of the stuff that irritates people, right, is trash, camping on the hillside, people hanging out around town. So again, breaking these pieces down is what's really critical, because that isn't all homelessness. And if you focus in on that, you know, there's some numbers we can look at there, and that's one of the things that Jen will talk about and what they dealt with in Durango. I'm going to ask Marion to speak to this. Well, wait, to this next slide. And how this whole idea of like when people ask all the time, you know, what's the number of people experiencing homelessness in our area? And Marion, you want to speak to that?
Well, so we do know that we have homeless, and I think they're much more visible in the summer, and our population also goes up in the summer. And there's also in our region, we have what we talk about as at risk of homeless. And there is concern that population is growing with COVID, and with many still out of work or just not able to get back to work the way they were before. So how many homeless do we have in our region? And when I'm talking about a region, I'm talking about Aspen to Parachute. So Catholic Charities has been involved in various efforts for over 10 years to help end homelessness. And since 2016, we have been working with community partners to not only count the homeless, but also to complete pretty detailed assessments, and also to maintain a list of those that we need, that need housing. So every January, when we talk about the counts, and Debbie was right when she said it's a point in time is what it's called. So it's one night in January, you're counting who's considered homeless. This last year in 2020, they held what's called a sheltered count. And what that meant was anybody who was in a shelter or transitional housing. So that was the people who were in the cold weather overnight shelters through Feed My Sheep or the Aspen Homeless Shelter, people who were housed through domestic violence shelters, or our Catholic Charities Rapid Rehousing Program. That count this last January was 51 individuals. In 2019, they held what was called an unsheltered count. And unsheltered is everybody who I just mentioned above, and anybody who's sleeping in their cars, in a tent, or what's considered inhabitable, and other places. So in 2019, we counted 92 individuals. But it's very likely that count, it's much easier to do your sheltered count. You're unsheltered, there could be people that were places that we did not count. So it's a good chance that is not an accurate number, but it gave us a place to start. So in January 2021, we will again be doing what's called an unsheltered count. And the more we can get community participation and volunteers to get out there and get us, help these people get counted, will be the more accurate count that we'll have. And that's all I'll do on the numbers for right now. Thank you.
I'm back. You are on the slide. Okay, back to me, Christina. Yes. Okay. The rain got here, and therefore my internet may also. So one of the challenges that we're seeing, it added, right, with COVID-19 certainly has upped those, but even before that, the health of those experiencing homelessness and the health of the community, because this, when you even talk about health issues, homelessness or having a home or housing is really at the top of that list, too, as is considered, beginning to be considered oftentimes now as a health issue. So the use of the emergency resources that we have because of that, environment and hazardous trash and waste, identification, and response to that is one of our challenges in the lack of affordable housing with services. And so those we have before us, not insurmountable things, we would say, but certainly a good list of things that we need to address. Next slide, Christina. And not to get down in the deep about any of these, but some of the current efforts that are happening, and they are. And as we're just saying, we're not starting at the bottom here or at zero, but we really, when we bring all these pieces together and get the community voice added to this and the government voice, that's going to be huge. Next, Christina. So Built for Zero. These were the organizations that went to that first training. What Built for Zero is really a methodology, a movement, a proof of what's possible, like that, right? Anchored in a commitment to driving to zero homelessness. And the aim there to end chronic and veteran homelessness, then end homelessness for all. So really starting at that place. Next slide. And I'm just kind of quickly touching on this. We put this slide in here just, again, showing what's possible, that how many communities are participating. We are one of 6 in Colorado. 12 have actually ended veteran or chronic homelessness, and 41 have achieved a measurable reduction. How many people have been involved? And they change this number, it like changes daily on their website. And that means that we know, and even in these communities, it's not like homelessness will never happen, but when it does, it's brief. And we have strategies to move that on and move that along. So that point in time sort of idea. The other thing I want to say about this is that Built for Zero was just announced as a finalist in the MacArthur Foundation grant for $100 million over 6 years. That says a few things. One is that, wow, this is a great bandwagon to be on, because certainly monies will trickle to us in ways. And secondly, the validation of the value and what's been seen with this strategy is certainly reiterated if you're at that level with the MacArthur Foundation in that kind of dollars, in competition for those dollars. So cross your fingers, and I think it just told us we've got something good there. Next, Christina. This is not to think that there's just no hope, right? That's one of the things that's so important, is that ending homelessness in our communities is not a hopeless goal, and there really is the possibility of doing that. So with that, it takes work, and it takes the collaboration that we're talking about, and it takes new learning. And that's why we've kind of brought Jen here, and why we appreciate so much your time, the community members that have joined us, because there really is a lot to learn. That's what when I started out too, it's like, oh my gosh, dip your foot in this, and there's a lot to know. And when you do, then decisions can be informed and really matter. The effort we put in matter. So with that, let me introduce Jen Lopez, and she will take things from here. I've talked about her just a little bit. A couple more things that you see about her on here is that she's really worked at the state level and in individual kinds of communities for a lot of years. She's has a master's in community regional planning, and completed the Achieving Excellence program at Harvard University. What we've learned is she's a smart cookie, and she really knows her stuff, but she is really easy to work with, and certainly passionate about helping communities, and she's demonstrated that. So Jen, with that, it's over to you.
Good evening. Thank you, Debbie. Hi, Christina. Thank you, Mayor and City Councilors. It's a joy to be with you. I am also in a rural area, so we may have some issues with technology. Is it working so far? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. I tend to talk a little quickly. I think that's years working in government and understanding that people have limited time. So I'll go pretty quickly through the slides, because I'd rather have a conversation and learn more about what your interests are and the questions you want to answer. I will say that the last time I traveled was in your community before COVID hit, and really love your area so much. I've been coming up there for years. I've been in Durango since 1991. I went to Fort Lewis, and then went to grad school, came back to run a regional housing group, and have done a lot of other things, but I am a Southwest, Western Slope girl. And I think first time I came to Glenwood, I felt like Santa Fe and Durango had a baby. So anyway, I just think it's a beautiful area, and we have some similarities around challenges and opportunities. And so I wanted to start really quickly with context. Obviously, we know we're in COVID, and we know things are changing rapidly. And so when I do talk to communities, which I do quite often with my consulting work, the first thing I say to them is, I know you're struggling with your homeless problem now, and it's going to get worse. And so that's not to scare you into tactics. It's to motivate and just be really transparent that we have to keep moving forward, and we probably have to move more quickly. So what they're saying nationally, and this came out about 3 weeks ago, is that about 16% of Coloradoans are housing insecure, and that we're going to see 300 to 400,000 Coloradoans be evicted this year. So it's coming. Next, Christina. So I do want to share a little bit about Durango's journey, because I do think there's some similarities and some differences, and I want to call out both of them. And so this slide's funny. I did a presentation a few months ago for Debbie, and at that time I was representing the Colorado Health Foundation and Interfaith Alliance. Those are two clients I work with, and they may come up later in the presentation when we talk about strategies. Next one, Christina. So, just a quick overview of Durango and homelessness. We've been struggling with it since the 80s. We've always had, well, I shouldn't say always, in the 80s, we started to have high cost area issues, started to see incomes. Well, our incomes are very low. Started seeing the housing getting out of reach for our workforce. Like in 88, 89, they started talking about it. We didn't see the homeless uptick until about 2010, 11, 12, 13. And then saw another increase around 14, 15. And at the time, we are right on the New Mexico border, and did make some connections with marijuana becoming legal. It's not popular, but I do think it was some of the influence. And then we really started to see impacts on our community. So we're a tourist town, and summers we see a huge influx of people experiencing homelessness. We call them the travelers. So we may have, I don't know, maybe a 50% increase in the summers. We started to see an increase in panhandling, illegal camping. And so this is where we're different from your community, because the impacts were being felt pretty strongly in our downtown area and neighborhoods. The issue around homelessness was falling really heavily on our local government. And so folks got really active and kept asking local government to step in and do something. At the time, the local government electeds, again, this was like 2015, 16, 17, really didn't want to get involved. And there's a good reason for that. At that time, there was not a clear understanding what the cause of the problem was, and not a clear understanding of the solution. And honestly, I hope that if we just ignored it, it would go away. And so I think a lot of communities start there going, you know what? And what we've learned over time is that it doesn't go away, because about 70% of our population have local ties. So about 2017, 18, our sheriff, who's an amazing person, Sean Smith, was ending up spending a lot of time taking calls around the homeless. And I don't know if this is true for your area, but along the backside of our downtown, we have a huge trail system, and it's like a patchwork: city land, county land, private land, city, county, private. And so that became an issue, right? And so the sheriff said, look, we need to designate a camping area because it's getting out of hand. And so he designated a county site, and sort of deemed some camp leaders, and they brought dumpsters in and kind of let them be up there. And it definitely got better for a little bit, having the camp up there and having a space for folks. And then in 2017, I went down to New Mexico. There's a model called Camp Hope, and it's a structured camp, looks like a KOA. It's really been highlighted as a national best practice. And we came back from that trip and said, this kind of makes a lot of sense. Next slide. And then 2018 hit, and we had the fires. And so we had to move all the campers because they were in wooded areas. And it became very obvious this having campers in wooded areas long-term is just a really bad idea. So if we're going to have a camp, it can't be there. But the fire obviously created a lot of chaos for the community, and we had to deal with FEMA, so it really pulled us away for about a year from talking about these issues. In the meantime, again, not having that designated space, we saw scattered camping, and we saw bigger impacts on neighborhoods. And literally had neighbors calling because folks were camping in backyards. You know, it was getting to be really intense. We had a small faith group start to talk about opening a new shelter. We have a safe domestic violence program, and we have a family shelter. And so they were looking at a shelter. It would have cost $1 million to open, and we didn't have that money. So we looked at it and went, that's not going to be a viable solution. Next slide. So in 2018, so in 2016 and in 18, we had community forums on homelessness, and we brought in speakers from around the state to talk about what was working in Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, other areas of the state. And those were really helpful in planting some seeds in the community. After the 2018 forum, it was suggested during the forum that the city and county think about putting together a strategy. And it made sense to pretty much everyone in the room because we were frozen. You know, it was like, well, who's going to do what? And everybody was scared to lead and get stuck doing everything, right? It's really important that everybody feels like everybody's taking their share and moving forward together. So the city and county put some funds together, put out an RFP, and hired a group called the Athena Group. They're based in Denver to facilitate. And then I was connected to them because I was interested in the issue and ended up, they needed my help as well. So I joined the team. In 2019, we kicked off the program. So we lost some time again because of the fires. We also had a city council election, and we had 2 seats turnover, and those ended up being really important turnovers. The folks that were in those seats before didn't want to take any action. The folks that got elected were ready to move. And so we kind of had a perfect situation to get a lot of work done. And we also had strong alignment and vision for the first time in many years between the city and county. So it was like, okay, let's go as fast as we can. So you take advantage of those moments. And I think the biggest thing is when you've been playing with that for a couple of years, I mean, again, it's been 3 or 4 years, and you realize that nothing doesn't work and it's actually getting worse, and people just get sick of doing nothing. So this is a slide about the continuum of different housing services that we would look at in any community. And you'll see that we've added Sanction Camp to that. Most communities don't have that today, but I suspect we're going to see a huge increase in this model. And I think you'll understand why when I start to describe why we did it and why others are doing it. But it really is a crisis response intervention, providing safety to people on the streets. And it connects folks living on the streets to services much more quickly because they're in one spot. And there's case management. But in a perfect world, every community would have every one of these pieces, right? You would have prevention, diversion, shelter, street outreach, coordinated assessment, rapid rehousing, supportive housing, transitional, et cetera, et cetera. So this is sort of the model for communities to think about how they might plan a continuum. Next. I told y'all I talk fast. You'd think I was from the East Coast, but so doing the Durango plan was one of the hardest projects and one of the best projects I've ever worked on. It was great because people were so ready to do something, and they really showed up open-minded and open-hearted and wanted to change the dynamic. We also got really lucky with the Athena Group. They had a really, really effective community engagement model. So we put together a steering committee with your key players, but we also made sure there were folks from the unhoused community on that committee. They drove everything we did with the process. And then we also did engagement in the neighborhoods. We actually walked around and looked at, where things were being trashed. We also went into the camps and worked and talked with the unhoused. And so my favorite part of the whole process was we did a session with the unhoused campers. We did a session with the neighborhood within 2 days. We brought the results together in one room, and they were saying the same thing. And that's when we really shifted as a community. And what they said is right here. It was these themes that we want housing and shelter for the community, and one size doesn't fit all. We need different options and models. People have different needs. We need health. We need services. They need to be available, accessible, and affordable. This was huge. We want a sense of community. People want to feel included and connected. So we had church volunteers that wanted to feel connected to people who didn't have housing, and we had people who didn't want housing who wanted purpose and meaning and connection. This was a huge one. We wanted it safe and clean for everyone. So everyone can agree that a river trail is getting trashed and that we're not comfortable using it in certain sections. That needs to change, right? Everyone agrees we don't want needles in the park anymore, those kinds of things. And then sense of purpose. So, how do we create access to work that works for everyone? So these were the themes that dominated the plan. What we did after this is we took every theme and then we let the groups, we had work groups, and we created very specific strategies. Every strategy in our plan is got a name on it and amount of funding. So it's very, very real. So we have 31 strategies. So it's really based on what people said they could do. Next slide. What was really fascinating about this is the camping issue kept in the background. It just didn't go away, right? So we had the fire, the dispersed camps. We talked about permanent camp during the plan. And we kept getting distracted during the planning process because everybody wanted us to do the camp tomorrow. And so it was a really interesting dynamic. And as you can imagine, what's the challenge with doing a permanent camp? Well, siting it, right? Siting is a really tough one. And so there is no good site for a camp. So you end up as a community picking the least worst site. We had to do a lot of education with the community about what is a camp, how does it work? It's not, we may even rebrand it here, to be honest, because camp has such a negative connotation. We're starting to move towards like transitional community, different things, but, and you have to have staffing for a model like this because, just think about it. Anytime you have a group of folks who may have mental health or behavioral health challenges and they're gathering, it's not going to work unless you have some structure. So this is a very structured model. Next. So we passed the Durango La Plata plan in January. In February, a faith coalition started working on the camp and the permanent camp, and we are going through the planning process right now. So that continues to move forward and will likely be our first big win. And I can talk more about that, but I'm going to shift now to a little bit of a different concept, just because of COVID, and kind of share what I'm seeing across the state now. So in April, when COVID hit, I started talking to a lot of my partners across the state. And what we noticed immediately when the state would talk about COVID was this assumption that communities had capacity to actually move people into motels or rehouse them. Was this like magic wand thinking? Drives me nuts, right? Like, okay, so there's an issue and communities can fix it. So what we ended up hearing much more on the ground was communities saying, oh no, what are we gonna do? We have people on the streets. What are we gonna do? We can't afford, all these interventions. And so very quickly, this model started to unfold. Some of it was informed by Durango, but there were other communities doing it as well. And we're calling it a safe outdoor space. And the idea is there has to be some kind of public health intervention for people still living outside. So the idea is you create a designated area where people live outside, where they have access to bathrooms, showers, and services. And this is really important that it's designated because we know that if people are swept, you're just making the problem worse, and you're really, the potential for community spread is bad. Really important here is also that these become designated areas where there's services and outreach workers. And like in Durango, we have a designated camp, like a temporary camp, while we work on our permanent camp. And in the temporary camp, we have public health coming out and testing for COVID every couple of weeks, that kind of thing. And so we call it a safe outdoor space. It seems to resonate more with local communities because of COVID. Next slide. So how do communities set these up? So there's usually a lead agency that facilitates identification of a site. A lot of government-owned land. That's the best thing a government can do if they have a parcel. So here we've got our temporary site on a county parcel and our permanent site going on a city parcel. We see parking garages, we see church parking lots, those kinds of spots. And then the agencies ensure that unhoused members have access to facilities like we talked about. We actually do site plans. So we're opening one of these in Denver, and we literally have marked out site, tent spots so that folks are able to socially distance in a tented area. And then we provide services, food and health checks and things like that. Next slide. So you heard me at the beginning, and I'm a little facetious, but why not just house them? Why not put them in shelters or hotels? So I got online just now, and you all have a hotel for sale in your area. It's a 60 unit. I think it's about 5.5 million. So there you go, right? No problem. So, I mean, it's a great idea. It's a wonderful idea. And I wish that we could do it in every community, but I'm not seeing the resources yet to be able to implement this kind of a model. And so, so the SOSs are rising up because we all learned very quickly how hard FEMA funds are to use and how particular FEMA funds were at the beginning for people who are unhoused. We actually are seeing a decrease in shelter use. I don't know if you all are, but I was talking to the VOA shelter here last week, and they had 2 families. They usually have about 15 people. So huge decrease because people don't feel safe in a shelter because of COVID. You're also always going to have folks who have pets, couples. There's always going to be a segment of the population that you don't have a housing intervention for yet. And so they're on the streets. And again, you know, we just don't have the resources yet. Next slide. So what does it cost to set up a safe outdoor space? So there's a wide range of costs, and I'm really glad that Nan's going to talk about what they're doing in Pitkin, because I think that's a great example. But in Durango, the informal designated camp right now is fairly inexpensive, but it's not staffed, so it's not ideal. We're seeing that facilities, putting everything in place minimally would be $15 to $20 a night, whereas hotel rooms are $100 a night, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a cost to it. We're seeing a lot of innovative ways that communities are bringing in partners to provide. So like, I don't want to talk about big cities, but if you've got venues and folks that have bathroom, you know, they're tenting, you know, there's creative ways to find community groups to help bring some of that to the table. Next slide. So that was a lot. So I hope we get to have a really robust conversation. But I think the opportunity to continue to strategize is right now. So what we know is the numbers are going up. We don't know when they're going to come back down, especially if we don't continue to move forward. But there's also some pretty large amounts of funding there that are coming down the pipeline right now. And I think the more communities have a couple strategies laid out, the more likely they get access to those dollars. So you have the CARES Act funding that is coming through your counties. There's also state money. There's emergency ESG, emergency shelter grants, which can be used for all kinds of great things. And again, you have to be very strategic about how you want to use those funds. And then we'll see if we get another stimulus package or not. And then the state rolled out on Friday a $20 million rental assistance program. And we're pretty sure the money has to be spent by December. I think it'll be spent in about 6 weeks. But again, communities are organized. You can take advantage of the resources. So I think that's all I had. There we go.
Jan, thanks. Nan, you're up.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Nan Sundin. I'm the Human Services Director for Pitkin County and a Garfield County resident. And I've had a passion about serving the homeless for a long time. So I've brought that into my work. It's not a common place for homeless services to be in human services, but it fits for me. So there you go. Our story really parallels Durango. So I'm really happy. It was exciting to hear Jen's presentation because we've done all the same things almost for the same reasons. In 2018, before the Lake Christine fire, we started community meetings to try to set up a shelter to house the homeless so that they wouldn't start a fire or be victims in a fire. We were not successful in those negotiations. So the conclusion of our group at that time was to start a coalition to see if we couldn't create more political and community interest in solving the problem of homelessness. So we took on the lead of that. We have a community-wide coalition that has over 100 participants. We have people experiencing homelessness. We have nonprofits, government, we have faith community, we have business, all represented on our committee. And in the year and a half until about January, we finally drafted our strategic plan, which clearly outlines our mission is to end chronic and veteran homelessness and to find a pathway to end all homelessness. And we have the same continuum of care that Durango has. We have goals to prevent homelessness. We have goals to establish a year-round shelter. We have goals to expand our case management, coordinated case management to support people who are experiencing homelessness. We want to rapidly rehouse. We want to look at transitional and permanent supportive housing and try to build that. I just want everyone here to know that early on, we queried all of our coalition members and said, do you think these problems should be solved locally or regionally? 80% said regionally. We continue to focus locally, but we're really excited that potentially Garfield County could create a coalition and we could establish a regional entity. When COVID hit, we had our strategic plan. And of course, as a county employee, I have a lot of responsibilities for emergency support function 6, which is mass care and housing. And so as we were setting up food and mental health and serving people with disabilities, we knew that we were going to have to find a way to support people experiencing homelessness. And so we instantly, when the St. Mary's Winter Shelter closed, we instantly opened our Human Services building as an emergency shelter for 2.5 months. And what we experienced in that was that not everyone was willing to come in because of the congregate shelter, because it was scary, because some are just not used to living with other people. And so by April 14th, we, maybe a little bit before that, I went to the county manager and said, I think we need to set up a safe outdoor space. I had talked to Jen. I had a sense of what it looked like. Believe me, it was a leap of faith. And we thought at the time we had about 8, maybe 10 homeless who would come to our safe outdoor space. And we set it up. We have a camp host. So it's peer led by someone experiencing homelessness. We pay him a small stipend. The cost of the safe outdoor space is aligned exactly with what Jen suggested. It's about $14, $15 per person per night. We now have 22 people living there. We have coordinated case management with Aspen Law, Mind Springs Health, our local homeless provider, and Pickens County Human Services case manager. We just last night had a camp meeting, and Pickens County is responsible for all of the infrastructure of the camp. We're putting a fence around it. We have sanitation stations, showers, trash cans, everything. Our intention at this time is to keep the camp through the fall until a winter shelter opens, or we get more clarification about public health orders. The entire intent of this camp is to promote public health. We require everyone to practice social distancing, mask wearing, temperature taking. We've separated the campsites just as Jen has suggested. And I think the main thing just for you all to know is it's doable, it's possible, it's inexpensive. And by having a community coalition and a plan, we just have been able to jump on making decisions faster for this population and also receiving grant money. So we received unprecedented $70,000 from Division of Housing to support our street outreach and our emergency shelter. And we received 2 grants recently to house homeless veterans. And there's more stories, but what we find is that it's really easy now to write these grant applications and to qualify because we have data and we have a working team of over 100 people and we have community buy-in. So anyway, I'll pass and I'm here if anybody has any questions.
Are there any questions for?
Well, I think Christina, Jonathan, if you give us a couple more slides, we're going to open the whole thing up. So Christina,
Awesome.
would you
Yeah.
talk to
Hello.
what's going on here?
Christina Garam, the director of West Mountain Regional Health Alliance. So one of the things you might be asking, although we've learned this pretty strongly now with COVID-19, for those who are homeless, without a home, you can't be completely healthy. And so that's where West Mountain Regional Health Alliance started getting involved with this issue, was around the fact that like we have people who are experiencing chronic homelessness and often co-occurring disorders, whether they're physical, mental, or behavioral health issues. And these are the folks who often, as Debbie alluded to, visit the ER more often, require more emergency services. And really what's the root problem is them not being housed. And that's where we came to look at this model called permanent supportive housing. And essentially what it is an affordable housing model where services are provided on site. Once they're housed and they have the on-site services, people who are experiencing homelessness can then have the ability to receive the help they need to stay housed. Often they start working. And so we were selected by the Colorado Health Foundation as one of 6 regions in the state to participate in a housing readiness pilot program. Jen Lopez and I are working together on this. We have development consultants that we're working with provided by the Health Foundation. And we're really, right now, we're prioritizing and searching for a viable property for this type of complex in the region. I was one of the last time I saw all of you, I was at the City of Glenwood Springs meeting where you talked about property that you had in Glenwood that might be available for affordable housing and other types of uses. And of course that hit, and then COVID-19 hit, but we really appreciate that consideration as we move forward. We have narrowed down to a few things, but it's a long process to get to permanent supportive housing. I think Jen will share that it was a long process to get there in Durango. We have some interest in lead services provider. That's one person who wants to be, really involved in the project. And so it's really exciting. It's been an interesting 2 years. I'm taking a crash course in housing as well. And we really just appreciate your openness to listen and talk, and the fact that there's so many people that care about this issue and about moving forward together to solve it. As Nan said, I was in that meeting or that survey where it was almost everyone in the room wants to look at regional solutions. So we're excited about that. And there is funds out there. There's housing funds, there's other funds. And so being ready to access them to best serve our communities is really important. Happy to answer any additional questions. And again, I thank you for being willing to listen and be part of the conversation.
So if you take us to that next slide, we're talking about a follow-up piece here. A couple of things that are of interest. First, council, if you set me out on a task, you know that I'm going to do something. And so it's been interesting to gather all this information, and it's just amazing, the amazing people that are out there working on things. It was interesting that safe outdoor spaces sort of has risen up, permanent supportive housing. I think these are all examples of the fact that when people reach that place of homelessness, to imagine that they're just going to move out of that on their own. There's certainly many that have and do. It really takes some effort once you get, let's say, down that far. And however, that's so possible, and that we know that if we get people going in a direction, it's amazing then how they can get their lives back together. We've run into this very thing with our Recovery Continuum Task Force. Very difficult for people to get their lives on a positive path without having some kind of stability just in their living situation. and or being able to find them. And I think that's what you heard some about the safe outdoor spaces, that now you've kind of, not like this is a permanent hangout, but a step toward a next step, which would be the housing piece, whether it's in our community or other places. But clearly people just, it's just not gonna, we can't wish it away. And that's a reality I know we've all kind of come up against. We would like to invite those that are on the call and listening, and to even pass that word, but to have a next meeting on August 12th at 2, and that we'll send that out through the next slide here, that Christina, maybe just go to that next one too, that will just give you the website or the email. So if either of you put your information in the chats, if we get that, but please be proactive and contact us so that we can include you. Now, this one next step, what we're saying is the Built for Xero Leads team is offering to provide the space for that next meeting, just to begin to gather those voices. We are not in a position, certainly, is like, we're just going to take this whole thing on. Obviously, we've all heard it's a real effort between all, but we want to take, we know there'll be questions tonight, but we want to take the conversation, or have the opportunity to have further and ongoing conversation. And that's the next step we're proposing. If you're interested, but that date and that time doesn't work for you, please let us know that as well. And but we'll just begin to figure out and kick up the other voices in the community that need to be heard on this issue. With that, I'm just going to open that up then, Jonathan, and back to you, maybe to call on people for questions, but you have all the panelists that you've heard tonight, and council members and others. We're just turn that over to you for questions.
All right, well, thank you guys, really appreciate it. I do see Tony's hand up, so Tony, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Nan. It's nice to see you in a different perspective. I heard, and I don't know whether Jen or Debbie or Christina can answer this question. I heard a lot of euphemisms, and the unhoused, I've heard the peripatetic, the undomiciled, but do you make a distinction between homeless and transient? And by transient, I mean someone who's chosen the homeless lifestyle, and we have a lot of those here involved in criminal activity who are not really interested in being housed. This is a lifestyle choice for them. They enjoy it. They're involved in sometimes in criminal activity, and they go from area to area. Do you make that distinction between somebody like that and then of someone, you know, who's come on hard times because of COVID or whatever, and is genuinely, they've been housed, they've lost their house, and they would love to be in a house again? So that's my question. Thank you, Jonathan.
Abby, do you want to take this, or do you want help?
No, go ahead, Jen, and then Nan, also with your experience. But Jen, that's what you've called travelers, I guess.
Yeah. All these names. So this was a huge issue in Durango, and certainly it was really fascinating. So our elected officials wanted the distinction made between travelers and folks who were local, who fell on hard times. What our service provider said to us is, don't over focus on those distinctions, because typically the travelers will travel on. They said they'll come and get food services, but they don't stick around and try to get into housing and other services. And so so it certainly impacts our food services in the summer, but it doesn't impact the overall system. I think Boulder has an interesting model. They have a navigation center. So folks come in and they're assessed, and I think they have to be in Boulder a year to get housing services. So communities are trying to distinguish who's here and who's moving through. And then in Boulder, I think if you're not a local, they try to resolve, and that may be, you know, getting you back to family in another state. So it's I mean, everybody's talking about it. I think there's ways to address it.
Thank you, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Nan, did you have any more to add to that with experience in Pickett?
No, we're the same, but we, you know, our safe outdoor space and our emergency shelter have really been focused on longtime locals who we've known for a long time. I hear a lot of people say they're homeless by choice. The more I speak to the people who live at the camp, there's a lot going on there, and I don't know that I would say it's a choice. I would say that they're doing the best they can, and And if we are open and ready to establish relationship with them, and we can do that, we actually find that they have more interest for their life. I would say we do have travelers. Some come from Glenwood. So we don't take them in our safe outdoor space. We have the camp host who pretty much knows who our locals are. We know who the travelers are, and we get big travelers, both winter and summer, amazingly resilient people who camp year round or whatever. And they're burdening our campsites, our Forest Service, all of that. But we've held fast that those are not the people that we're here for. We're not for people who came from Denver and want to camp for the summer.
One other comment about this that I think our community felt better about is we want anyone who wants to give back and participate in a healthy way in our community to be able to be here. So we did have folks who had been in the community less than a year, and we just said, can you give back? Can you get involved? And they did. It was amazing. So they started, cleaning up camps with us. They started going to meetings, and again, these are folks just trying to survive. So our community was more about, setting a standard and expectation of mutual respect in behaviors. So.
Marian, do you have any kind of thoughts about that, about folks that you see in that sort of position? And then I would go back and ask Nan and Jen, maybe particularly even a little more, because I know this is one of the issues, and that's what Tony is saying. People come in and what about people who are committing crimes and all the trash and stuff, right? You might say that's a different group of people, and what have you done or tried to do? But Marian, would you maybe say a word about what you see in our communities regarding that? Oh, we don't hear you. I don't know why, but there you go.
Still don't hear you, Marian.
Still don't hear you.
This out now. Can you hear me?
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
We do see the same group of travelers, as Jen calls them, that come in town. What we try to do, kind of going along with what Jen said, is if they stop in to us for services, we're asking them why they're here. Can we, where are they going? Why are they here? Sometimes we're helping them move on and get to another place. We do try to make it clear that we aren't in the business of helping people relocate to our area. And so we actually, when we do services, we have less than a year. It's usually about a 90-day kind of policy that we have for really kind of helping people stick around. But everything's so individual, and I think everyone's kind of touched on that when somebody needs help, even if they haven't been here long, they just got here, maybe they got here because they thought they had a job, and they never bothered to look at housing costs, and now they don't have anywhere to live, but they do have a job. So you have to really assess everything individually. But it's a challenge. And in Glenwood Springs, it's being on the I-70 corridor is definitely a challenge for our community. And people who are, now the buses just start running again. They weren't running before, but you've got people who are perhaps going to Grand Junction or even going to Utah, and the bus stops in Glenwood to fuel up and let people take a break, and they go, wow, it's pretty here, and they don't get back on. So we definitely, it's a challenge, and it's just something you have to talk about. And that's where I think you use the wisdom of people who are kind of going through it.
Well, Jen, what about the trash and the criminal activity? Let's just talk about that stuff before we get on to other things. But because those are the kinds of things that I say that are the irritations and the things that we see in front of us, and Durango certainly had or has those issues. what have you done there? What have you seen different?
Oh, let's see. So one of the things that came out of the plan that I wasn't anticipating but makes perfect sense is we're going to put together some kind of drug task force. I mean, drug use, whatever population housed and unhoused, is on the rise and a problem. And so we didn't quite tackle that, but we were able to name it. One of the ideas we talked about, we haven't implemented, but I love this idea, and it's happening in a lot of other communities, is you put together work crews of people who are unhoused, and you use city and county contracts, and they go out and they clean the trails, and they know people. I love the peer model stuff so much because, you know, they know who's from where. So that's one of our ideas moving forward, is trying to put together one of those work crews. The temporary camp we have is self-managed, and it's fascinating to me because they have 3 mini camps within the camp, and there's one camp that's designated if you want to use drugs, and they kind of let them be. And the other 2 camps do a lot. They cook together, they do stuff together, and they police themselves. I mean, if you're misbehaving, they kick you out, and they'll call the sheriff and say, get him out of here. So it's, you know, it's been interesting to just, we want to keep building that capacity in the community to really employ people and use peers. But I think I keep going back to structured environments, whatever that looks like. If you can house people, great. If you can't, can you do an SOS? Because it's when we can't supervise spaces or be able to, you know, go out and clean up trails regularly, we start to see real problems. The camp we're looking at right now is really close to the neighborhood that's been hugely impacted by the illegal camp. And the way that we're getting that neighborhood comfortable is we're saying, look, we can put them here and all of these things happen and it's supervised, or they're in your backyard. And if we put them here, we can start enforcing illegal camping, and we can get them out of the backyard. So, you know, it really helps to say you can't be here, but you can be there. Really helps. Because if you can't do that, we also, I didn't say this, but this was a huge part of our story. We got threatened by the ACLU. In 2017-18, they wrote a really awful report about Durango and how inhumane we were to the homeless populations. And they held a forum here, and over 100 people showed up. And that's really, I think, influenced that council election and where we saw the big change. So not to be scary, but it's true. If you don't have enough housing in a community, you can't tell people they can't sleep or be somewhere, right? So.
And Nan, just on the last piece of that, and then we'll open that for other questions, but have you seen any differences? I mean, certainly both of you have talked about, you know, the fire issue and people camping in the woods, but as far as trash or any kind of illegal activity or stuff, has that been something that's manageable in a different way because of what you've done? Or?
Well, I was this morning where Open Space and Trails said, thank God for the SOS because of all the reasons Jen just said. And they're not finding the long-term illegal campers because they're at our safe outdoor space. And these are not people who are committing crimes. Most are working. Their biggest challenge is probably drinking. We have had calls for service because of drunkenness and violence, but we've now issued a zero tolerance. And we had a camp meeting last night, and the 20 people that were still there said, thank you. It feels safer. We want to feel safe. And we started talking about what are you all going to do as a community to make it work. So we're kind of evolving, but they're not out there committing a crime in our community.
And I would just, one other thing, I just love this model that we stole from Las Cruces is when we set up our permanent camp, we will have volunteer hours. Everyone in the camp will do 6 hours a week. We'll have a security shed. And so again, you know, it's not just that there's not issues other places, is that they're keeping this place clean. What I really love in Las Cruces too is that they actually do community cleanups as a community. So they'll go out twice a year and clean up the illegal camp areas. So it's just been a phenomenal benefit to the community.
Shout out to you, Rachel Wen, if you're listening, because many of us in the community have heard you talk about this model in ways, whether it's tiny home or whatever, but that people have a safe place to be and contribute. But so here we are. It's surfacing in many communities. Jonathan, back to you. But I knew that those were issues that have been circulating, and wanted to just be sure we dug that out a little while we had these guests. Tony, did that get some of the stuff you're talking? Great.
Paula, go ahead.
Hey, thank you everybody for this presentation. It's great. I have 1,000 questions, but I'll stick to one. So we've talked to, you started this all out as a regional opportunity, and you explained what where Pitkin was at and what Garfield County was doing and what Eagle was doing at this point in time. And maybe this is a question for Mason, I'm not sure, but what are we looking at as far as Garfield County's potential participation in working towards a solution here? Sorry, Mason, put you on the spot.
Paula, I don't think, Mason, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that's anything Mason can talk to. He's really their data person for.
Well, I
public
do
health.
work on, so our regional public health improvement plan, which we have to work on starting again in 2021, our two priorities were mental health and housing. And so we are working on this, but as you have probably heard our commissioners say, we are not in the business of building houses. So if we can partner with agencies and organizations to give our expertise or data collection or anything like that, partnering with West Mountain, that's where I see where Garfield County would really be involved.
Thank you.
All right, Rick.
Sorry about that. Hey, good evening. What a rich presentation. Lots of insights here, and I think it kind of congeals or boils down to citizens who want to see something done. And I don't think anybody is homeless by choice. Even if they're a traveler, they certainly have a history, and they probably have some druthers. I always ask the question in a group like this, who among you would trade places with any of those people? And I don't get many takers. But that aside, we've got a strategic plan. The city has a vision that we started to work on in September, and homeless and mental health issues are right up there as key factors in our quality of life in Glenwood. And there's so many parallels with Durango, and so just a lot of good synergy that I see coming out of that. But my question would be, how do you get a coalition of 100 people? I mean, and I'm not sure, Debbie, how wide you think our coalition is, number one. And then number two, it sounds like Pitkin County has a living, breathing strategic plan to deal with this issue. Not just everything that the city is looking at. And so maybe that gets back to what Mason said too, and that is how do we tie all of this together so that people can see that there's some deliberate action that will be happening there. I think we've done a great job. I think that Debbie in particular has done a great job of getting people talking about these issues, but I think we're ripe to do some more coalition building and perhaps a strategic plan that might even have some data in it. And if we don't have data, we'll just steal it from Durango and from Pitkin County and Eagle, and everywhere else that we can get it. But I think that, having that together in one lump would be a big part of this. Our strategic vision, we haven't talked about this for a while simply because of the pandemic, but I think it's probably time that we as a council start to chat about that. And the first goal, of course, is survival, and that's the first rung on Maslow's hierarchy. And so I think we'll be at that for a while, but nothing wrong with sort of keeping our eye on the prize. So thank you, panelists. You know, those insights are really powerful, and I love the idea of the peer sort of cleanup, the peer establishing camp rules, and you know, it seems like that they can see themselves in it and they become more accountable. So thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Deborah.
I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to you guys. I know, Debbie, you took this and you ran with it. You all applied together for Build for Xero, and you're amazing group of ladies, and thank you. And then also to apologize, it wasn't that I wasn't interested. There are multiple mudslides and rock slides going on all around us. I had to slip out. So catch me up on what I missed, Debbie.
I will. Rick, I think that that's what we felt, that I've mentioned a little bit, that we could, and Ann was very generous to say, yeah, here's our strategic plan in Pitkin County. Use whatever piece of it you can, right, as a framework, and we add our numbers, or does this work for us? And the same with Jen. We had conversations earlier today, just how did they get to next steps? And each had some of the same direction and a little bit different. Now, we will say that we're ahead of Durango in that Durango doesn't have Built for Xero, right, Jen? We've got that going on.
We're trying to apply. So there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. So you teach us that, and we'll teach you strategic planning.
And I think hopefully this next step is that we opened up an opportunity for people to come together August 12th. So trying to put that out there, and we've gathered many of the professionals. We really need to have that more government involvement. The faith community has put together a grouping that they've been meeting every few months or every few weeks, I think. They have participated in our recovery continuum task force. And so that community is getting more organized with these kinds of issues. So now as we open it up to citizens, since I started, I have a mailing list of over 100 really particular business people, everybody, right, who's expressed their concerns or interests from the beginning of when I started working. So we have a really good beginning place, but that's what we're hoping, is we find an openness for that, and August 12th is what we've tried to make a place for.
If I could, I would just add, Debbie, that we didn't start with 100. We started with the people that we knew were passionate about it. And we got a lot of press. We invited the press to every meeting. We had a strong sense of facilitating the meetings, so people felt accomplished, like we were getting things done. We created the continuum. We created vision, mission, values. We had task groups. We have a work plan. And so I think it takes time, but most of all, it takes strong leadership. And, you know, I lead this, but I have a team, a steering committee that Christina sits on, and some other people that are on this call, Marion sits on, and we don't, you know, we make decisions together. We're inclusive. We involve the people experiencing homelessness, and we involve the naysayers. So we got everybody at the table trying to hash it out, and it seems to be working for us.
Thanks, Nan. Shelley.
Okay. Again, thank you so much to Debbie and Nan and Christina and everyone, and Jen, for everything you've presented here. I'm really excited about the direction this is going, and that, you know, we're moving in a good direction and working towards someday being able to end homelessness in Glenwood Springs. I think that is a great goal to work towards. And it's really exciting that it's a complicated issue. There are a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, but it's encouraging that we have a lot of things in place already. And now with the Built for Zero model to work towards and learning from what's going on with SOS in Durango and Aspen, I think those are exciting things that we can look at how they can work here. I'd love to see Garfield County, if we can engage them and bringing them on as a full-on partner for Built for Zero. I'd love to see that happen if it's not really in place already. I think that would be great to work more regionally. I did have one specific question on, if we're able to work towards having an SOS space set up, does that give us, and I think Nan and Jen both touched on this a little bit, but does that give us a good ability to solve that safety and issue of the illegal camping on the hillsides and the accumulation of trash and safety and health hazards that we have up there?
So
I'll just start, Jen, just simply because you probably have a more robust answer, but I would say it does. And let me tell you that we have made the SOS as comfortable as we can, and it's safe. And what I heard last night from 2 of the people in our camp meeting was they're not getting rousted every night, right? And they feel like they can relax and they have a safe place. So it's been very attractive to the people experiencing homelessness, and it's full, and we actually have more people that we could house if we had to. And I think it's solving the problems that you talked about.
Great.
I think Dan did a great job. We have a temporary space right now, and it's helping we have a lot more campers. We have probably over 100. And so we have maybe 35% in this temporary camp, and then we're working on a permanent camp. So it makes a dent. I don't want you to think it'll solve the whole problem, but it will make a huge dent. You'll see a difference. And we always say it helps those 35, right, that you're serving, really helps them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all the work on this.
Thank you. This is Christina. I would just add, now I'm losing my train of thought because I would just add that all of these things are part of that continuum that Jen mentioned, and that idea of, so all of these things are kind of working in parallel to get started. So for example, with Permanent Supportive, that's in process, but at the same time, people are being housed. So I do want to shout out to Catholic Charities and our providers who have housed quite a few people since January, and I'd have to rely on Marion to know that exact number. It's like 12 or more. Is that correct, Marion? And so things are happening. We're making progress. At the same time, we might see some backtracking because of COVID-19 as people who are on the margins experience homelessness as well. So that's why it's so crucial to move forward with some sort of plan and really start just putting those puzzle pieces together. I like that analogy, Shelley, because it's gonna get worse if we don't start putting something together.
Right. Well, great. Well, thank you.
We have actually housed 13, and we got 2 in the queue. As soon as we find housing, there'll be 2 more.
And we've had the new veteran vouchers for Garfield County area, right, Marion, and people on that. We've had a lot of recent conversation about working with the veterans officers, et cetera, but veteran homelessness is a real thing, and certainly one of the focuses of Built for Zero, and one of the focuses of our local Built for Zero efforts.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I guess, we kind of had questions of everybody to start off with. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions on how we would like to see this continue to move forward?
Jonathan, there's a couple people who are attending that had questions.
Yeah, and usually it's a work session, so usually we don't take public comment during work sessions. But if folks would like to hear their comments, I'm open to it. I don't particularly care.
Well, Jonathan, we do have another agenda or to talk about something else tonight, but I just want to say thank you to everyone, and I look forward to the next meeting. I don't know that it's appropriate, though, to take public comment. This isn't really a meeting, a work session, so I would object to that, given the time constraints. Thank you.
And that's where we're making August 12th available for, so that we can take that conversation into a place. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Debbie.
Go ahead, Charlie.
So I just want to join everyone else to say thank you. This is very interesting. When I read the PowerPoint before the meeting and then listened to it tonight, I'm enthused. I would hope that we can follow this camp kind of concept and see what we can do to begin helping the people in our community who need that help, and also solve some of our trash and other safety issues, fire safety issues in particular, for the camp in the hillside. So I want to thank you, and hopefully we as a city can help locate some place where we can maybe develop a temporary camp. So that's my view. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, and just I guess while we're here, we do have 7 minutes left before the end of this scheduled meeting.
I know, we did.
Yeah, nice job.
I know, right?
I did not think we weren't heading that way, but we pulled that defeat out of the jaws of victory, or victory out of the jaws of defeat. Yeah. But I tell you what, we do have a couple people, and I'd love to encourage folks to get engaged. And normally we do not take comment, but if people can keep their comments, we only have 2 comments, brief. I'm inclined to give them an opportunity to speak, because I don't know if they'll be able to, not knowing if they'll be able to participate on August 12th. So with that, Rachel Wynn, do you have a brief question or comment? Need to unmute yourself, bottom left.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can, yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi. I swear I want to cry. I've been working on this for 8 years. For 8 years, I have gone around and talked to probably over 200 communities, stakeholders, to try to get people to sit down and talk about this. And now you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so, thank you. I'm retired, but I want to be involved. I did my internship with the homeless. I've been here 40 years working with one-on-one with a lot of the homeless people that have lived here for a long time. And I even went down to Durango and saw everything that they were doing. I wanted to find out what they were doing. I started a nonprofit to try to hone in on this subject. And so I put this is one of my passions, and I'm thrilled to hear people on the city council interested in this subject. I've talked to John Martin. I've talked to so many people. So maybe before I die, maybe we'll have something. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. We'll, you win some and you lose some. I remember you weren't a big fan of our conversation about vacation rentals. So let's call it even on the scale. Okay, thank you very much for those comments, Rachel. Really appreciate that, and thanks for the encouragement. JS, please give your name and an address if you would. And at bottom left, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Jan Shute. I was just asking if you could please give again the August 12th details. So it's 2 o'clock, and how do I pass on information for people that are interested?
So 2 o'clock on August 12th, we'll do a Zoom meeting. And if you would, Jan, of course, I've got your email, but if you would contact us or tell people to contact Christina, it's West Mountain Region. Give us that, your email again, that your generic email that you want. Putting it up on the screen. West Mountain Health Alliance, West Mountain Health Alliance at gmail.com. So Jan, just contact us there, and or have anybody contact there and say they're interested, and we'll send out the link. We'll send out the Zoom link.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jan, appreciate it. I'll just bring it back to council real quick. And again, I want to thank, well, everybody, Debbie, Christina, Jen, Nan, appreciate you calling from Picken County. Well, not from Picken County specifically, but we know. Mariana, and everybody who participated. Also, I believe Paula wanted to talk a little bit. We got an email, and this doesn't pertain necessarily, Debbie, to Build for Zero or specifically your group, but if you want to hang out and if you have an idea or want to offer an opinion. But Paula, did you want to kind of talk about the email that we received earlier this week about the property above Walmart? Because I think this isn't a direct tie-in, but it's pretty darn close.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it actually came to mind as we were having this discussion, especially talking about placement of the SOS opportunity. But right now we have this area up above Walmart that is the county has actually got heavily involved in, and because of the trash problem there, because of illegal homeless camps. And we got a email, I think it went to all our counselors, about what could we potentially do with this space, because the county may be buying that land from the private owner. And a suggestion was made of a park, a suggestion was made of a way that the community could access this area and enjoy it. And I would just like to bring it before City Council, because we are looking at, not trying to tie this into it, but we're looking at a development there that may cut off that access. And it's just an opportunity I think we should at least have in front of us and be considering, is if we use this for an SOS place, if we use it for a park, how would we have access to it? And is it something the council wants to talk about as an opportunity for Glenwood Springs, even though it would be on private or Garfield County land?
May I make a suggestion? This was, I meant to say this earlier, but the city-county conversations and coordination is huge. And in our strategy, it was a set-aside parallel process. So we did the community process and city-county process. I love this so much because the city and county need to coordinate if there's going to be a site and how it impacts one another. And so I'll just put it out there that maybe there's a joint city-county session in the near future where you could talk about a couple key things we're doing on. And you know, that's all you need is just a couple, right? And that would help. So
thank you.
Paula, what were you thinking of that site for? You weren't thinking of it as a homeless camp, permanent camp, were you, I hope?
That's not what my initial thought was. I just was interested in Laura, hi Tony, Laura Speck, Laura Speck's proposal of it becoming a park, an additional park for the area that, you know, Glenwood citizens and others could access.
But you said cut off. I don't understand what you meant. Cut off what?
I'm just, the development there right now, the way that they're planning the walls and that type of stuff, I'm not sure there would be access up to that area. So that's the cutoff I was talking about. And that's just, it just happens, all of this coincides at once. And so that's why I was like, we should at least bring this up for a conversation if it's somewhere that we want to look at. And I'm just thinking, based on what I saw of those plans, if we potentially approve that development, what that would mean for that area. So there's a lot of little ifs, ands, and buts around the whole conversation, but I just think it's worth having out in the open and having people be aware of it.
And I know we don't have Terry Parch, but maybe Jen Newton is on this call and maybe can speak a little bit to that easement that the I believe is in our packet that they want to speak about. Actually, you know what? Let's not talk about it because this is a land use application that's going to be before us in 2 weeks or tomorrow night in like 20 hours. So Jen, if you could maybe file out a way to speak on that, about that easement and access to that property potentially in regards to with that tomorrow night, that'd be great. You don't need
and
that.
I'm sorry to overlap all of that. It's just like this all kind of is a perfect storm.
All right. We're only 2 minutes over time. Thank you very much for everybody joining us. We really appreciate it. A lot of progress is being made, more progress probably in the last 20 months than the last 20 years. So and this probably wasn't much of an issue, as much of an issue 20 years ago as it is now. So thank you to everybody. We will adjourn or take a break. I think we're taking a break and coming back at 7:30 for a actual city council meeting session. Deborah, are we using the same login information, or should we just stay logged in? Does it matter?
I would think staying logged in will be easier, but up to you guys.
Let's just stay logged in, and we will reconvene here in 28 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Can anybody hear me? Charlie?
Yeah.
I got an emergency situation with a juvenile here. I'm gonna just come off. I'll be right back. I'm trying to reach.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
I'll let him know. Deborah, did you see my note on I went down by the train station to break and didn't look really bad, but looked like with street sweepers and stuff, they had it pretty much cleaned up.
Good. I know Matt was concerned when he talked to me, it could take a little while. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you see the river?
Pardon?
Did you see the Red River?
No, I didn't go that far down. I just went down enough to see the intersection. It was raining, so I didn't realize that I was out there without a raincoat or anything. So
I'll text you the picture. It's crazy. We took it from a house.
Pretty red?
Very red. Catherine, I'll send it to you too.
I've seen it like that, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Thank you. It's crazy, isn't it?
I've never seen it this red.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Oh my goodness. It's crazy.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hershey had an emergency with the juvenile. I think he's still tied in, but he may not be able to participate for a few minutes. He asked me to let you know.
Okay, thank you. I didn't think he was participating at all. So if he's able to jump on, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, I-70 is open as well as State Highway 82.
Mason, thanks so much for joining us. Sorry you had to sit through the first 2 hours.
And that's okay. It's something, like I said, housing is one of our priorities. And so it's been, homelessness is one of those things that we routinely have to discuss. And so I was okay.
Cool. Okay. Well, we have, I think we have a quorum. So, Alyssa, are we live? Okay, we are live. All right. Welcome back, everybody. At least the people who joined us for the first part of the meeting. We are now in a special session of City Council. So, Catherine, could you take roll call?
Willman?
Here.
Voorhees? Cope? Godes?
I'm here.
Davis? Step?
Yes, here.
Hershey? Cope?
Kaup is here.
Voorhees?
Well, we can, I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance while we wait for a couple other people to get freed up. And if that doesn't happen, maybe we'll just hang out with our videos off for a couple minutes until Rick and or Tony can get free. I'd love to have the conversation with more than just us four. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
Mr. Mayor, for those who may not have heard, 82 and I-70 are open.
Good news. Rick Voorhees, are you here and present?
I am here. I'm not sure I'm present.
Right. All right. Well, this is a work session, or I'm sorry, this is a special session that we asked for last week to tag on to the homeless conversation, because different people had questions, concerns about the overall trend that we're seeing in Garfield County, concerns about now, we didn't at the time, but we were informed last Friday, I believe, and Mason can jump in here at any time, that we have been put on the naughty list. So, and that's a technical term, right? The naughty list?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, good. I live with a public health official, okay? And so, I would love maybe just to, before we all jump in and start throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what all the things we want to potentially do with our non-existent public health department at the city, I would love to hear from Mason kind of briefly what the stats have been, what they're showing, what the concerns are, what the state's concerns are, and really what potentially the risk is to Garfield County's economy, and what our current status is.
Sure. So I do have some slides. I sent them to Deborah. I didn't think about sending them before. So
I
I'm
emailed
gonna,
you guys just now.
okay. So I'm gonna share my slides.
I smell gas. You have. Sorry.
Okay. So for those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Mason Hosted. I work for Garfield County Public Health. And so I have pulled out some specific data around Glenwood Springs related to COVID-19. I'll have some more county specific or non-Glenwood data in here, but for the most part, what I'm going to share with you is Glenwood specific. So the first thing I wanted to show is the breakdown of COVID-19 positive cases. And we're really looking at this from at least within the department, pre and post variants. And what does that mean? So we were at the stay-at-home period of time. And then about April 27th, we were allowed to move to the safer at home. And then we were granted a variance from the safer at home on May 25th. And so that allowed us to open up certain parts of the economy, certain parts gathering restrictions and things like that, that other parts of the state didn't have at that time. And so we really think about our cases pre and post variants. And so what I wanted to show is that there has been a 62% increase in cases for Glenwood Springs residents since June 1st. Really, truly, kind of another way to think about it is that there were 60 cases of Glenwood Springs residents between January 1st and May 31st, which is about 21 weeks. There have been 99 cases of Garfield County residents, Glenwood Springs residents since June 1st to the present. And so I use onset dates. We're going to talk a little bit about that because that's something that we utilize for what we report out. But it's really kind of a stark idea that in 8 weeks, we've had so many more cases in Glenwood Springs.
Jason, I hate to interrupt, but can you tell me what you mean by a case?
So that is somebody who has either tested positive, had a positive test result, and we had to do a case investigation on them, or they have, in the beginning, we were conducting case investigations on probables due to the lack of testing and the ability to really get a test for individuals. And so we would still conduct a case investigation on them. We conduct a case investigation on our asymptomatic persons. And so a case is really just that singular person that we're working with who meets all of those, one of those criteria. And so it's just based on that case investigation. I wanted to show other towns. So Carbondale during that same time frame had a 60% increase. Rifle saw a 71% increase. Parachute, which is a little 77% increase from of cases from the pre-variants, and then Silt saw a 68% increase in cases. So some confusion lies in the idea of report date versus onset date. And so we, with the county, report out onset date. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, that's when somebody is actually sick. So it doesn't necessarily, I'm sure you probably have heard that there are some delays in getting test results to individuals. And so it doesn't really make much sense for us to report out to you that somebody got their test result on July 19th when they were actually sick on July 7th. And so this, again, is Glenwood Springs data. As you can see, we saw the disease spread within Glenwood Springs before we had our first reported date. Our first report date was March 14th. And so if you look at that, you can see a couple of things I want to point out. As I was talking about, you know, we went into stay at home right around the end of March. We moved to safer at home towards the end of April. And then we had our first variant in this time frame here. And so as you can see, we see a really sharp decline in the number of cases by onset dates. When we move to the stay at home period, a little bit of a blip, but then starting right here with the move to safer at home, we started seeing some increase in cases. And then really truly when we started really opening up and other, some of our neighbors were able to open up as well, we really see our cases jump. I use this type of graph to really show a couple of things. But the most important is whether or not a period of time is statistically significant from another time period. And that's what that error bar is doing. That error bar is showing me whether this time frame is significantly different. So since there is an overlap between these two bars, even though we have this number, it's probably 2, this number is 5, that's not significantly different than each other. However, as you can see, we have onset dates right here from June 15th to June 21st, really no significant difference between these 3-week periods, but then we jump up. And that's you know, a really sharp, I mean, without even really having the error bar, you can see that that's a significant shift. We are seeing declines in cases from Glenwood Springs residents, but these 3 weeks are not necessarily statistically significant from each other.
And Mason, just while you're taking a breath, Shelly Kelp has her hand up and
I'm
wanted to ask
sorry.
a question. No, it's okay. You probably can't see it, and I don't want you to have to worry about monitoring that. I'll just interrupt and let people jump in. Go ahead, Shelly.
Hi, Mason. Just a couple of quick questions. I'm wondering, so this is only Glenwood Springs residents?
Yes, I was asked to kind of give a Glenwood specific take on the data.
Okay. And does, so what if people are in town and let's say they're from Texas and they test or they get sick while they're here, are they counted in this data?
They are not.
They
No,
are not
they are
counted.
not.
Okay.
No. And so that's some of, I'm glad that's being brought up here because we do have visitors, whether they are visiting Aspen, whether they're visiting Glenwood Springs. If they come here and test positive here, that case will be sent to where they reside, to their residence. So individuals from Texas or Florida, we've seen quite a few people from Floridians in the past couple of weeks. They will be under the umbrella of their local
of their state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then can I ask about that blip that happens in the week of June 12th to the 18th? the big spike. Do you see that in the other Garfield County cities? Is it the same magnitude? Or
Oh, I haven't looked at that, but I would assume. I mean, if I'm seeing, you know, a 77% increase in the number of cases for hair issue from June, you know, starting in June 1st, I'm going to see probably something similar to this. I don't know for sure, but I would presume that I would. And I just didn't do that today. I did to parse some things out, but I didn't make a graph like this for all of the municipalities.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. And so then the other thing I wanted to highlight was what it would look like if we just used report dates. First of all, we'd only really be talking about, you know, we'd have a cutoff point or a start point of 3/14 when we had our first report date. And as you can see, we had one case reported of a Glenwood Springs residence for the entire 2 weeks of April 25th to May 8th. But obviously the virus was still here during that time. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to report out onset dates. Report out report dates, just because, again, that's not when somebody is sick. It doesn't help us doing our case investigation and our contact tracing.
Mason, Rick Voorhees has a question.
Sure.
Yeah, Mason, can you go back? Yeah, thank you. So what does it take to get into the chart on the left there using onset dates? I mean, so I would have to manifest some symptoms, and then a doctor would have to agree that I might have had COVID, or how does that play out with the testing element?
Sure. So these would be only positive test results.
Okay.
So if somebody is tested, we get notified that they've been tested and tested positive. We then do a case investigation, and our EPI nurses go through a series of questions to find out when they were symptomatic, or whether they were asymptomatic. We are at about 10% asymptomatic cases across the county. Glenwood Springs is at 11% of the cases that we have that Glenwood Springs residents have is about 11%.
But if I'm asymptomatic, I'm probably not going to present myself for a test, right?
We would highly recommend that people who are asymptomatic do not get testing. That is part of our regional testing strategy.
Yes.
So if somebody is asymptomatic and getting a test, it could be for a variety of reasons. Their workplaces has told them that they have to, which we would still highly recommend not doing, or they've been in a close personal contact with somebody who has tested positive. But again, we would really recommend, and that's the regional strategy between the 3 public health departments, is that individuals who are asymptomatic not get tested.
Thank you, Mason.
You're welcome. And so I wanted to really then talk about what testing looks like here. So there has been a message that more testing would mean more positives. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And as you can see, all of our municipalities have seen at least a 60% increase in the number of cases that they've had since June 1st. If I was going to see that same type of scenario play out, because we're testing more and finding more, our positivity rate, which is the bottom line, would have jumped up. 60% in cases during that time frame would be about 1,000, 1,500 cases, which we're just not seeing. And so we want to make sure that we're really understanding the idea that we do want to test. There are particular providers who are testing our vulnerable populations, and they are seeing a higher positivity rate than other places. But for the overall time frame, we're not seeing more positive cases. We're not seeing more cases because we're testing more. I was asked to basically conduct this positivity rate for the 14-day periods, like a rolling 14-day period. And so from July 7th to July 21st, we collect data on testing from Valley View, Grand River, GMA, and Mountain Family. And in that time frame, there were 1,654 tests conducted, of which 168 were positive, which gives us that 10.2%. We would really like to see that number go below 10%, but also go below 5%. That's one of the metrics that the state uses to test whether we are at a high, medium, or low risk of disease spread. And so I just want to counter that narrative that just because we're testing more, we're finding more results, and we're not. And this clearly shows that we're not, because if we did, we would see at least a 60% increase in our positivity rate, and we don't see that.
Mason,
yeah.
Sorry, jump in real
That's
quick.
okay.
How does that 10.2% positivity rate compare to Eagle and Pitkin County?
Don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I could find out. I'll take some notes because they do report that out on their dashboards. So most counties in Colorado have a dashboard for their COVID response right now. So it would just take me after this or tomorrow to take a look at it. I do think that they are having it. We're seeing, although our numbers are different, we're seeing similar types of spikes in cases as well as positivity rates. So we were all fairly low coming out of the safer at home with our variances, because all three counties were granted variances. And so all three counties are on the naughty list, as it were. And so we're all three having to work together and separately to come up with plans to mitigate some of those the increases in cases. Oh, I wanted to go back to something. So I'm really hopeful that we will see a continued decline in cases. As we can really see, we saw a decline in cases. Starting July 13th to July 19th would be the last cases from any sort of spike from July 4th gatherings, just based on symptomology and symptom onset incubation periods. So I'm hopeful that we will continue to see a decline, I'm just hopeful that is what's going to happen, if I can be hopeful about something. And so then I wanted to break things out. I didn't break this data out by pre or post variance. This is just the total numbers. We see that our 20 to 29-year-olds make up the largest portion, not a majority, but the largest portion of the cases in Glenwood Springs, followed very closely by 30 to 39-year-olds. And so our working age population is the population across the county that is seeing the most cases within their age group. And that makes sense, right? We opened up the economy, we opened up places for people to go to work. And it makes sense that population would see an increase in cases. And I should have broken that out pre and post variance. I have for the commissioners, but I didn't do it for today. And if there's a request, I can do that. And then probably the biggest story is our cases by ethnicity. We are seeing that our Hispanic and Latinx population has a 4.75 times higher rate of testing positive for COVID-19, or having a positive case of COVID-19 in Garfield County than their non-Hispanic counterparts. And as you can see with this again, I didn't break this out pre or post variant, but 69% of the cases in Glenwood Springs are Hispanic or Latino. We know that a lot of this population are in service-oriented work, particularly up Valley. And so we're working on how to reach that community in different ways. But it is something that we are concerned about, to the point where we are readjusting and coming up with new ways of communicating mitigation strategies to that community.
Mason, I got a couple of hands up here.
Sure.
Shelley and then Paula. You're unmuted, Shelley.
Jason. Oh, okay. I had a question, probably going back a little bit, but sorry, I'm a little bit shook up by the current slide.
Okay.
That's somewhat disturbing, very disturbing actually. But I'm just wondering on the numbers and the testing. You said that we don't test anyone who's who's asymptomatic. So does that mean, do we really have any idea of how many people are out there who have not been symptomatic but might be silent spreaders or are in the community and have the virus?
So no. So it's not recommended that people without asymptomatic people not get tested. It doesn't mean that they don't get tested. So it is happening. Current reports, I mean, if you go to a 10%, you just go with 10%, even if the CDC came out with a report that somewhat up to 40% of people with COVID may be asymptomatic. That came out a little earlier this week. It's difficult for us to try in this phase of what we're trying to deal with to really get a handle on that. We're really in the containment and mitigation. So we really want to work with people who have been tested and test positive, and work with them on containing the virus to as few people as we can when they're with other people. The replication factor right now, which the replication factor is the number of people that a known positive is passing the disease on to, and Colorado at this point is at 1.18. I think we might be a little bit higher, just because when we talk about the spread within our Hispanic and Latinx community, it's we're talking about multi-generational families living in smaller, in more confined spaces, and things like that. So we're seeing, unfortunately, our workers with workplace, or what I'm calling workplace adjacent exposures. So, carpooling, etc., becoming exposed and then coming back to home to their families and exposing their families, unfortunately. But we have community spread, and so it's really until we get more containment, I think it would be really difficult for us to try and figure out exactly how many asymptomatic people we have.
Okay, thank you.
Paula and then Rick.
I was going to ask you about families and Latino and the spread within families, and you answered it perfectly. Thank you, Mason.
Yeah.
Rick, go ahead. You didn't unmute yourself, Rick.
Great. Hey, thank you, Mason. I'd like to just ask a quick question about the bar graphs that were about right there. So the last bar there on onset cases, 713 to 719, would that ever move up?
It will.
And it would move up just because of the backfill of people who might have been tested during that period that are now found to be onset.
Right. And so that's, again, why we don't really report, we don't really present report dates, because, again, this like you said it perfectly, is that the idea is that that's when that person was sick. And so it gives us a better idea of the disease spread within the county and within this, with this graph, Glenwood Springs.
And so whereas, Mason, the three bars before that are relatively static, I mean, they're not going to move much?
I would say so, just based on the, what we understand about the incubation period and symptom onset. I would say we're probably not going to, those are probably not going to move as much as we might get a couple cases, just because we are seeing a delay in getting those test results back from the state, from whoever the the provider is sending out their testing to. But just based on the idea of what we know of the symptomology, I would say that those are probably pretty static at this point.
So it may be possible that that 713 to 719 bar could maybe increase as much as the 716 to the 712 bar, perhaps. I mean, we don't know yet, right?
Maybe. I'm hopeful that it's not.
Right. Yeah, me too. Me too.
Because that would be really detrimental. I'm really hoping, like I said, since that would be like the end point, like the end week of seeing symptoms from people gathering for 4th of July and things like that, I'm really hopeful that doesn't increase too much, or that it kind of aligns itself more to the first couple of weeks of post-readiness.
Great. Hey, thank you for answering that question, Mason. Good job.
You're welcome. And so then the final thing that I wanted to share, because I know this was kind of a conversation that you were having, was what mitigation and containment, right? All of our, we had over 800 businesses put in a social distancing business plan. Where I'm not sure exactly what Pitkin did, but they did something similar, and I know Eagle did something similar. In fact, Eagle did the same thing that we did, because we basically stole their social distancing plan to make it our own. And so one of the things that I really want that we have to work on is working with our regional partners as well as our municipalities on workplace safety. Our workplaces adhering to their social distancing guidelines that they said that they would when they signed their social distancing plan? Are they reducing the amount of carpooling? Are they doing all of those things that we asked them to do, that they said that they would do? Because we are seeing community spread from workplaces that are then coming down to us. And so we also have to work on a regional level with that, because we do know that over half of our population out commutes, from Parachute to Glenwood, half of that, and Carbondale, half of our workers or more out commute to places outside of the county. And so we have to work regionally on that focus of workplace safety. So the thing that I was talking about in communicating with our Hispanic and Latinx community is working with on a promotores de salud model to work on getting real evidence-based, but culturally and linguistically appropriate communication that the promotores will go out into the community and be able to give to families and those that they're working with. We have, since the beginning of this, we have communicated in as many platforms and ways that we can. We've worked with the city of Glenwood. We've worked with Grand River Health to get out, specific health-related information in both English and Spanish, and in Spanish only webinars. We've been on the Spanish language radio stations. We've given print material, and so we really are seeing the need to change how we are approaching that communication. And so we're working hopefully with a couple of organizations, local organizations, to help develop those, working with some local people to help develop those as well, so that we can get that information out. It is part of the state's requirements. If we are to move to protect our neighbors, is how do we, what is our containment and mitigation strategy? We really need to work together to increase quarantine and isolation. How do we work with our municipalities and with our employers so that their employees can feel comfortable that they will have a job, and comfortable in saying, I'm sick and I need to quarantine because I've been in contact with somebody who's positive, I need to stay home based on public health orders. And then also isolation, right? So isolation is different than quarantine. Quarantine is if you've had been in close contact with somebody who's tested positive, but you yourself do not yet have symptoms. And we would, again, not recommend you getting tested until you have symptom onset. Isolation is for those individuals who have tested positive that we then do a case investigation on, and we work with them on that process. So that's what a case investigation versus a contact trace really is that isolation versus quarantine. We really need people to stop moving. I want people to be able to go to work, and I want people to be able to do the things that they want to, but they have to do it in safe manners. We have seen a 62% decrease in people staying at home based on data from the state using our this cell phone technology that nobody really likes to talk about. But we've seen 62% decrease. So people are moving more. And we know that that's happening because of workplaces, but we also know that's happening because people are maybe not thinking about how much more they travel and do things increases their risk of contracting the virus. We need to increase face covering usage. We want everybody to use a face covering. Thankfully, the city of Glenwood has their mandate. And then really limit the people that you are in contact with. It just, the three things that we have in our toolkit right now are to stay home and reduce the number of people that you are in contact with, social distance, and face coverings. That's really the only three things that we have, and that takes everybody to be able to really do that. And I think the data really shows that when we did that, we saw a real decrease in the number of cases. And now we have to put some of those in while keeping our economy open, while keeping our restaurants open. We have to see those things come again. So, that's a personal responsibility situation, right? How many times do I need to go to Target this week? How many, do I need to go out and eat every day? Maybe not. So, putting some of those things back into play for people would really be beneficial.
Mason, and maybe you'll get to this, but one of the things we're probably going to be talking about tonight. Oh, great. It is a question and comment section. I led right into that. One of the things we're possibly going to be talking about tonight is enforcement and compliance, and trying to bring that up as much as we can. What can you just describe, and if you can't, because you're the stats guy, and thank you very much, by the way. This presentation's been fantastic, and thank you for tailoring it on very short notice to specifically Glenwood Springs. I think it gives us even a better idea. But can you talk about if you get a complaint, you or Zachary or anybody else in the office gets a call, hey, this is going on, or I was at this restaurant or this establishment or whatever, and I saw staff or a bunch of citizens who weren't doing it, the staff wasn't asking them to do it, like it made me feel uncomfortable. How do you respond to that? What enforcement options do you have at your disposal, and how do those things usually play out, and then how can they play out?
So I will discuss as much as I know, and then that would be a further question for the logistics team. So I know for sure that we would do a level of education, right? We want to make sure that everyone is educated to the best scientific knowledge that we have. That's something I didn't mention, and since we're on a live YouTube, this is something I bring up to everyone. We have had between 7 and 8 months with this virus. We have had less time to try and learn about this virus, to learn what it does, to learn how to stop the spread or to suppress the spread. We've had less time with it than people have in a school year. And so when something changes or a new thing comes along or an idea, or like the biggest one is masks, right? There was a period of time in the beginning where there was some less than we didn't really have as much understanding of what protections a face covering could have. Now that we have more knowledge, we give more knowledge out, and that is why more and more states are putting in a mask mandate, because we are learning more. So when I'm reading The Great Influenza, if anybody wants to read it with me, about the 1918 pandemic of the war flu or the Great Flu. And so it's interesting that we're repeating some of those ideas again 100 years later with a novel virus, and that's what it is. It's a novel virus, and we've had less than 7 months with it. And so when we give out the best information that we have at the time, we're not trying to put one over on people. That's the best information that we have at the time, and we will learn and grow just as much as the science learns about the virus too, and then we'll give that information out. To go back to the question on enforcement, we would really try to work on education, right? People don't want to be non-compliant. People want to do what's generally in the interest of best public health possible that they can. If it were to go beyond that, that would be a question for the logistics team. I'm sure that there were probably some legal remedies that would be sought, but those would be obviously our last ditch effort. But we would really work on education for those types of scenarios.
Thanks, Mason. Other questions for Mason? All right, seeing none. Mason, do you have any last thoughts to leave us with?
I do think there is an approach that Mesa County was taking that I like, which is giving kind of a grade for people based on for businesses, restaurants, etc., that are adhering to prevention efforts. That might be something to look at as a way of not necessarily looking at enforcement being, a stick that we want to poke people with, but maybe looking at how do we, going back to the presentations before, how do we work with that? Really fostering that idea of mutual respect. So I know if I go into this business based on the ratings that have come through, that I expect that people will be adhering to the social distancing guidelines as well as face coverings, etc. So that might be something that we are looking at as a county, but it might be something to look at as a city. But other than that, I think I'm done for the night.
Okay. All right, well, I guess I will bring this back to council based on, and Mason, if you want to hang out for a little bit, that would be fine if other questions come up. But I know at our last meeting, we talked about our concerns about the numbers, our concerns about what's happening. We talked about what other communities were doing, whether it be enlisting the businesses in a manner that would hold them accountable, whether it be a face mask order similar to Aspen and Breckenridge and some other communities, mountain resort communities that have a downtown area that they've said, if you're in this downtown area, you're wearing a mask inside, outside, roundabout. What say you? Where are our thoughts on this, people? This will be a very short meeting if I don't start to see some hands.
Oh, you want hands?
No, go ahead. Hey, Paula, knock yourself out. I do not need hands. Just jump in at this point.
I really liked Mason's that last idea about Mesa County grading businesses. I know that would take staff time though, so that's the part that I'm like, how do we do that as a community? some kind of database that the community can get involved in and grade a business, but that becomes a little bit subjective. But I'm just wondering, is there a way to do that? Because I think that's what most people that I encounter with, they're just disappointed when they go into a business and there are no masks and they feel unsafe and they leave and they don't know what to do about it and they feel awkward asking people to put their masks on. So this kind of outside grading system of some way or another may at least allow the community to see who's following whatever measures we put in place. I know that's subjective, so I know that gets tough, and I'd hate for anybody to be vindictive, which leaves it more to a staff kind of thing, but I know Deborah doesn't have staff, so I don't know where to take that, but I really like the idea of it. I am really pleased to see the mandates that we have in place through the state. I think that helps us a lot. And I can say the other thing that from some of my meetings that I've been in, I feel that when we kind of started the mandate, we were the leaders. And so we took the brunt of people opposed to it. And now what I'm seeing is businesses, even that were at the point where we were asking for variances, who were like, yeah, I don't know if we need a mask, are now totally engaging with it. So having the community involved in participating is making a big difference as far as wanting, the businesses want to stay open. So they're asking their customers to put their masks on, which I think is really important. Jonathan and Charlie and I were in an FAB meeting this morning, and the conversation came up. We as citizens, do we approach people and say, "Can you put your mask on?" And I think it's okay to do that respectfully. To say, we want to keep our community open, and we welcome you. We want our visitors here, but we really need you to respect what we want to happen. As far as the whole downtown area, I would like to hear some discussion on it, how we could do that or even enforce that. I mean, again, we're back to not really having staff available to run around and tap people on the shoulders. So
I think that's a great question for Chief Darris. I think he is, I'm going to allow you, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. Hold on, I got to do some clicks here. Go ahead, Chief Darris.
How about now?
Yes, now.
Okay, apologize. Good evening. I can speak a little more globally about that, and allow me just a couple minutes to kind of explain how this works. So, as you probably all know, we have to prioritize our calls for service. And not that this is not an important topic, it is, but a lot of times the officers just are unavailable to respond to these kinds of calls because they're handling other types of calls of violence, domestic violence, assaults, or what have you. And then when we do have the occasion to contact somebody about their mask, our experience has been that everybody has been compliant. We haven't had one person challenge us on that. Although we have been seeing some posts lately on social media about groups of people trying to organize and challenge the Walmart store or the Target store about their face mask requirements in different municipalities in the area. We just haven't had that occasion yet. Once it presents itself, that's going to be an interesting problem. But assuming that we do have that issue where we have to confront somebody and they're non-compliant and we do take enforcement action, that gets into a whole situation with the court and how far does our city prosecutor or the district attorney's office want to take that? And that's not for me to decide, that's entirely up to them. And then do we want to engage in any kind of litigation, civil litigation beyond that and be the example, which is, again, not for me to decide, but I just try to present these things for all of you to consider when we talk about the situation that we might find ourselves in. Fortunately, again, we've been lucky that everybody's been compliant. We haven't been put in a position to have to go down that road. And I do know that you've all entertained the idea of bringing private security downtown to supplement a presence there, which would be a very good idea because they would be in a much better position, number one, to respond to something a little more quickly than we would. It doesn't take up the time of a sworn police officer. And we would suggest that they would have some masks with them and just educate people, particularly visitors that might be unfamiliar with our policy, provide them with those masks. And then lastly, one thing that you may consider in some of the other mountain towns in the area that are doing that I'm aware of, they have signs like A-frames, and you would designate, let's say in the downtown core area, exactly what you've been describing about an educational piece, like in this area, or if you find yourself in this area, please know that masks are required. And we space those out fairly close to each other. Somebody would be in a position to say, oh, I didn't know, or I came from, 3 blocks up, I didn't know. So those are just ideas that we have. And I just want to try to explain to you the situation that we find ourselves in. Even if we were fully staffed, it would be a challenge.
Thank you, Chief Darris. Really appreciate that. That's good information. If you want to just hang out for a little bit, I'm sure we'll have potentially more questions for you.
Yes.
In the meantime, I have Deborah, you have your hand up. Did you want to?
Yes, I just wanted to briefly, Paula, you acknowledged it would be difficult for us. I do think we would get you guys into all sorts of trouble if staff tried to grade businesses, right? Because the first business that we didn't grade an A, you'd be able to hear the screaming from wherever. So, and just to kind of follow up on what Chief Darris said, I do have, we haven't fully fleshed out options for you guys, but if you want to talk more about the private security, essentially it's $28 per hour per person. There always has to be 2 private security people on. And, so that range is, if we're looking at, just a Friday and Saturday from 5 to 10 for 10 weeks, it's like $5,600 all the way up to a Thursday through Sunday, 5 to 10 for 10 weeks. That's about $10,000. We can pick any of those options. We can do it 7 days a week if you guys want to. It's just $28 per person per hour, pretty standard. They could have masks with them, and it would be more of they would also hopefully be helping educate our population to not sleep under the bridge as well, and then also doing this. So would it be perfect? No. Is it the best we can think of? Yes. The money's in the budget. We didn't cut the police department operational funds.
And Steve Davis gave me his proxy vote to say that he really liked that idea. I'm kidding. We don't actually have a proxy vote available. Tony, you're next.
I really like the idea. I'll give you my proxy vote, since I wish we could have a work session every week on infrastructure, but it's fun to talk about COVID too. I think security is a good idea. I will tell you from someone who deals in the punishment business that punitive sanctions, I think this is a little like seatbelts. Seatbelts weren't accepted for a long time. People understand now that they're the safest thing to do. Everyone should wear a mask, obviously, and that is the safe thing to do. Private businesses mandated. The chief will tell you, if you don't wear a mask at Walmart, Walmart can ask you to leave. You are trespassing. It's a private business. But here, my final thing, Mr. Mayor, is, the governor has usurped us, in my opinion, he set his rules. I know we're a little town and part of a bigger state that's part of a bigger country and a bigger region, but I think, we can keep talking about this a lot, but I think the governor has made good decisions regarding masks, and we should have masks, and everyone should do what they're supposed to do. It's an interesting topic to talk about, but I just don't love the idea of, and I would advise Paula that it's like a bad idea to just run up to random people and say, put on a mask. That's confrontational. The better way is to educate people and say, hey, this is the reason why. And I think the security would be great. Hey, look, this is the rule. If you could do that, I have masks with me. I know you poo-pooed my mask dispensary idea. Kathy Trogger actually loved it. So if we had masks available like they do at stores and other places and are handing them out, then I think that would just encourage people to do it. But I don't see prosecuting tourists and stuff. That's not why they're coming here. They're coming here to get some relief. And finally, telling them not to travel, I think, is probably not reasonable, but that's all I have. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Tony. Rick.
Yeah, I think we've seen a sea change here. I want to compliment my colleagues on the council for sort of bucking up and getting us through at least the first couple months of this mask issue. you know, it's not just the mass that we're dealing with, it's other issues that we should probably look at, you know, in terms of our relationship and the message that we're giving the outside community as they venture here. You know, and I'm heartened by the fact that the chief says that anybody that they've asked to mask up, they've done it. I know similar experiences with some of the businesses in town. They've said, you know, would you please mask up? And people have done it. I think we're getting better with our signage. And I did have a chance to talk with Deborah a little bit about highway signs coming in, much as Carbondale has. When you go to the roundabout, it says mask rule in effect. And, you know, there are people that will visit us that wonder if we still have pockets of towns where it's okay not to have a mask. So I think we probably should remind people of that in sort of a more visible way. But on the enforcement side of things, you know, it's not a lot of people, it's not a huge percentage of people who are resisting this. And I think the science has caught up to wearing face masks as a important contribution to not spreading the virus. And so I think that, you know, enforcement wise, it's maybe 10 to 12 to 13 to 14%, depending upon what polls you read, of people who are actively opposed to this. And I think that we've got a mandate from our voters in Glenwood, based on our last public meeting, that this is what they want. Enforcement wise, you know, the problem is, and the chief could probably verify that, is if you get one who's fully committed to making a statement and they're dealt with, and the next day you have 4, and then you have 16, and it could grow exponentially. And I don't want to put any of our people in that sort of posture. It'd be nice if we could try to have a dialogue with the people who are, you know, so adamantly opposed that they're going to put everybody's health at risk, but I don't know that that's possible either. So I think we have to be on guard. We have to, I think, continue to try to educate people. And the last thing I'll say is that if we were going to decide that the downtown area, however that's bounded, maybe by Colorado and Cooper, perhaps Blake and Pitkin, you know, depending upon what common sense leads us, and we want to make that a mask required zone, that might help spread the message out further to people. And so I would tend to support that if that were to come up tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Charlie.
Thanks. You know, one of the concerns I have, well, 2 concerns I have. That one slide that showed the Hispanic population being so large is significant. We need to make sure we're getting the right education materials out to our workers and Hispanic people. And Deborah, I don't know, I know we have the signs, but we ought to have, and this is not my suggestion, one of my constituents sent me something that supports us and said she would help to take signs around, but we ought to have some in Spanish as well, saying that you need the mask. So are we doing that?
Like the ones that we're putting up there in English on one side and Spanish on the other.
Okay, all right, good. I wasn't aware of that. The ones I've seen are English, so I mean, I've looked on the other side. We want to make sure that they're just as prominent on the Spanish part of that, so we have the warning down. I think we need to be very careful. I'm not sure if I support a mask zone downtown, but I think we need to be very careful to, you know, keep people wearing masks as much as possible when they can't social distance. I would be inclined to support the private security if that's feasible. My concern, you know, it's a cost issue, but if we have to shut down, we talked about this in the FAB meeting this morning, if we have to shut down the attractions in this community or in the county, it's going to bring Glenwood to a screeching halt again. And we're going to have significant, not only health problems, but budget problems and how we meet the basic needs of our citizens. So I guess I would favor, if there's a good plan for it to be brought to us in August, maybe before or do it tonight, is go ahead and do the private security, have them with masks out there, maybe on our big nights when we have a lot of people down on Friday and Saturday nights. Maybe even during the day on Sunday, during the day of Saturday and Sunday. It could be a really good investment to keep the numbers down with our visitors, and better than having a mask. No, everybody got to wear a mask in this zone. So that would be my view of where we ought to go with this. And I do think we have to be careful. We do not want our budget to take another hit.
Thanks, Charlie. Deborah.
I would just say, if you guys would like to do the private security, the money is budgeted. It's well within my spending authority. I can do it. I just kind of wanted a head nod that you liked it. And then if you had any general direction on days and times, it's one of those things we can adjust it after we've done it. So I don't want to wait until August if I have a feeling that the majority of you want it.
I guess I'll just jump in. I was just anecdotally, and sorry, I'm going to jump with you, Shelley, real quick. I was out and about riding my bike around downtown and stopped to have a beer at Casey's on Monday night. And I was surprised because when I went in, I reached my pocket and I didn't have a mask. And they said, sorry, you can't come in, and which was great. But then I was like, oh, do you have a mask that I could use? And they said, no. And so I had to go next door and ask them, and they did. And so I got my beer. But Monday night, there was live music. There was things were going on. So I think that, the ability always, inside or outside, to maintain social distance, even on a Monday night in the midst of, a busy tourist season, I would contend that it's difficult to maintain social distance in our downtown, and whatever that core is. I don't know where it extends to, but I guess I would say that that's difficult to maintain. And I would also be supportive of security, but I would be supportive of security more broadly than just a weekend, because my experience is if you go out there right now tonight, every place is going to be packed. So, Shelley, go ahead.
Okay, I'll just weigh in quickly on a few items because I feel like we're talking about quite a few different things. As far as downtown security, I would support that. Whether or not we do the zone, I guess it depends on the level of crowding that we're seeing down there. If we would do the zone just over a weekend, I think that could help with having a private security, because it would kind of define the area where they would approach people. And, maybe it kind of coincides with our no smoking area or something like that. But so those I'm in support of. I don't know as far as having any kind of the business ranking or having a punitive issue with businesses. We might want to hold off on that and see how compliance is going, especially if we institute the security guards downtown. Although the compliance issues that I've heard and that I've had people contact me about are typically not downtown, they're just random businesses. But those were, for the most part, a few weeks ago and before there was a statewide mask order. So it could be that there's better compliance, and there's certainly been a lot of raising of awareness in the last 2 to 3 weeks about the importance of masks and how we need to keep that R0 number down to stop the spread. I guess one of the main things, again, agree with Charlie, I'm really concerned about the high number of infection that we have and disproportionate in our Latinx community. So I'd like to see us talk about that a little more and how we can work closely with the county, but even specifically in Glenwood Springs, and make sure that people in those communities have access to all the support they need. Particularly, the governor just signed this Healthy Families and Workplaces Act. And from what I understand on that, that guarantees employees 6 days of sick leave related to COVID related illness, or having to care for someone in the family or a child if it's related to COVID issues, missing work. So that could be a good safety net that keeps people from going into the workplace when they may suspect or they may be ill with COVID, and you know, having those kind of things in place and really getting the word out and making sure people know what their rights are, I think is very important. So I'd also like to compliment, when I was downtown, I saw we've added quite a few new hand washing stations outside the porta potties that saw them over by the 9th Street parking garage and downtown. So I think those are important things too. I don't know if we want to add any other of those in places just to help people, you know, from touching surfaces or keeping their hands clean while they're downtown, things like that. That's it.
Okay, so Rick, go ahead.
You know, Jonathan, if you'd quit muting me, I wouldn't have to unmute myself. You know? But anyway, so it sounds like Deborah, so you're okay with a head nod then on the issue of private security. And, you know, I know the governor has basically shut down serving alcohol after 10 o'clock. So, you know, that might save us a little money on the outside, but it may also, you know, maybe create some problems too. I'm not sure. So we have to sort of play that by ear and see what the effect of that is. And I know that one of the proposals was Thursday through Saturday, and Mayor Godis believes that maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday would also be eligible, but I would be content in Deborah and her staff and the chief sort of figuring that out and sort of letting us know, you know, what the art of the probable is here.
If that's a motion, I would second that, Rick.
Well, you know, I don't know if you need a motion, Deborah.
So it is budgeted and it's in my spending authority. I just wanted to make sure you guys were happy with it.
Okay, well, you know, I'm good with that too. You know, the other thing that I was going to bring up is the downtown boundaries. It might be a providential thing that we wouldn't be sorry that we did to actually survey some of the businesses there and see what their thoughts were about making a downtown all mask, all time zone. You know, I think that their support has picked up a lot. I think that, you know, it may make them feel safer, and it would be just interesting to hear them weigh in. I don't know how quickly we could get that done, or how much of an imperative it might be to actually do this. So I'm just throwing that open for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Paula.
I just wanted to voice my opinion that yes, I do think we need the security. I think that will help, especially if we incorporate the mask part of it, asking, you know, handing out masks and educating people why we want them to use it. I also was downtown this week. I got to go down to the Tuesday market for about an hour or so. Very nicely done. It was great seeing the activity that was going on around there. But I do agree with Rick that I think this is the type of thing that we need to talk to the local businesses. And I know we're meeting weekly pretty much. Don't we have something next week as well? Oh, it's recycling. Never mind. But it would be nice to make sure that the town has an opportunity to speak to this as well. I see, as you know, trying to keep my transportation down, Mason, but when I am driving through downtown, I do see a lot of people wearing their masks from store to store. I do see, and I can also tell when you see more of a tourist kind of thing of people not wearing their mask in between stores. So I just want to know how this would affect our businesses. You know, is this a good thing? And how do they feel about it? So getting some sense of what they think, I think is important. So, but I am for the security, and if we have it budgeted, I think we should take advantage of it.
I'll make a couple comments unless you have something directly to respond to that, Deborah.
I was gonna say, I think we're happy to talk to businesses, do some kind of survey somehow. I don't know how. If a majority of you want us to go in that direction. So I think that is direction I need. Private security, I can handle. But if you want us to start talking to businesses about how they feel about this, let me know.
Yeah, and I guess I would, just speaking for myself, that I think, we had talked about, like Aspen, for example, does find businesses if people or staff are in their business not wearing masks. And if we're not there, that's fine. But I hesitate to do a survey every time we want to do something to protect the public health. And I guess I would say also my experience this weekend, not staying at home, Mason, sorry. But, I used to see perfect compliance at Lowe's and Walmart, and now I'm not. I've talked to Paula and Charlie today. I shared a story when I was in Walmart the other day of a gentleman who was making a statement in Walmart, a very public statement. Someone came up and confronted him. He was wearing a Glenwood Demons baseball shirt. So he wasn't a tourist. He was just a local who just wasn't going to abide by things. Now, he abided by it enough to wear it to get in to do his shopping, but wanted to make a statement. And it put the staff in a really difficult situation. So I guess I am okay with taking a vote about having a zone. If we want to have further discussion on what that zone looks like tonight, or we want to put that off, but maybe telegraph it and get ideas on where that is, so that in in August 6th meeting, we can institute it. But I don't think we should be surveying businesses every time or individuals every time that we want to institute something for public health. If we would have done that, we wouldn't have done a mask ordinance ever. So that would be my opinion. I would like to take a vote on that tonight with maybe staff to determine where that boundary would be, or it could come back to us in 2 weeks. I don't think that is the big deal. I'd be fine with Thursday through Sunday initially for private security, and then just encourage folks to go back downtown on Monday and Tuesday nights and just see if they still feel that way in a couple of weeks. And then I lastly would just encourage everybody when they're at Walmart or Lowe's or other places to see what it looks like there. Are you seeing the same compliance? And is that something that it's not just about downtown? 80% of our sales tax revenue comes from places other than downtown. So I think it's just something we need to keep our pulse on. We need to be looking around and seeing if this is something we need to look at, or are there things we need to look at in the future? So with that, I think, does everybody give me a thumbs up if everybody feels kind of okay with Thursday through Sunday, private security, 5 to 9, 5 to 10, give staff discretion on that? 5 to 10, Tony? 10, okay.
Because of the bar. I'm sorry, I was muted. Because of the bar.
Sure.
My view is it's a good place to start, Jonathan, and Deborah and Chief think maybe we vary it, they got authority to move it around to try to get the times when there's more people out there. So
yeah,
and I've been on weeknights and there hasn't been many people there. So
yeah, and maybe it's just a random busy Monday night, and so let's maybe revisit
you were
it.
There and everyone wanted to see you.
It's a good band. There's live music, and the live music, by the way, sidebar, is awesome. Under that bridge, it's almost every night that we're down there. It's really cool. So let's start there. If somebody wants to come back on the August 6th and expand it, let's have a brief conversation and see if we want to. But let's start there. Head nods. I feel like everybody's kind of there. And then I guess I would just like to take a vote on, do we want to give guidance to staff to determine boundaries, not set the boundaries, not enact anything in the next 2 weeks? I guess I would want it to come back before us, but maybe just give guidance on what those boundaries would be like if we wanted to do a downtown mask and zone, I guess. So do I have support at least to give staff that direction?
Mr. Mayor, did you say 80% of our tax dollars comes from places other than downtown?
Yes.
Okay, so but that's a busy area still. That's what you were thinking of, the downtown area, right? For the zone.
Yes, the zone for downtown, because there is just higher density and drinking and a concentration of people in those times. So that's what other mountain communities have done. Not all of them, not the majority of them.
Aspen,
but Aspen, Breckenridge, I believe Estes Park has several others. I think Salida was contemplating it when I spoke to them last. So yeah, I guess, is that something, again, we don't have to vote. I guess I'm asking for is, can we give staff direction to come back for us on that August 6th meeting with what that would look like, and then we could take a vote on it then, I guess is what I'm asking. Yes, Charlie.
My view, if you're going to do it, you do it in the same zone as our tobacco, which has got North Glenwood and all that area. I don't think there's any, this is not rocket science if you're going to do it. That's the area we've identified as being the critical area in town. So I don't want to waste staff's time unless somebody thinks there's going to be something different than that.
That's fair enough. Do I hear a motion, Charlie? Okay, I'll make the motion to create a continuous mass zone in the the downtown boundary that's contiguous with the no smoking zone.
And Mr. Mayor, by that zone, you mean that people in that zone, no matter what they're doing, would have to wear a mask?
Well, obviously not driving, but yes, if you get out of your car at the smoke parking lot, you just put on a mask if you're going to someplace, and then when you get into your place seated, you take it off, or your place of business and go into your office. So everything inside would be consistent with the state's order.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Jonathan, can I ask too on your motion, would that be to do some outreach over the next 2 weeks as Paula suggested, talk to businesses? So we're not creating it tonight. It's more giving direction to staff. Okay, I think your motion said create it. So just ask.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Maybe it did say that, but I guess I will, if that's a friendly amendment, I would say yes. My motion is to create it, effective in, let's say, 2 weeks, so that we can telegraph to the community and the visitors that this is going to happen.
Okay. I guess I would prefer an amendment. I'll withhold the second.
No, go ahead. What do you prefer, Shelley?
For staff to get an ordinance together and bring it back for us to consider at our next meeting. But in the meantime, do some outreach to the DDA and downtown and get their input on it.
I'm good with that. I withdraw my motion then if we don't need a vote then to direct staff to that, because I think that's what I started off with.
Yeah,
I also think, I'm sorry, Mr. Hanlon. I also think, Mr. Mayor, time is important too. So thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say, we can, I mean, I'm comfortable if you want to have something drafted to bring back the August 6th meeting, but I also respect that Councillor Hershey's comment on timing on whether it's more urgent than that or not, I think was what he was getting to.
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you, Carl, for being more articulate than me.
So Tony,
I think it's moving very fast, the whole situation.
So Tony, if you are supportive of this, what would be your suggestion on timing?
Well, I like your sort of suggestion at the beginning.
I
forget. I had a lot. What was my suggestion that you liked?
I think what it was to give, I believe your motion originally, Jonathan, was to implement it, to adopt it tonight with implementation in 2 weeks or 10 days or 7 days, whatever seems appropriate, to give everybody enough time to process that's coming. So it's not like a tonight thing, but to kind of have it be self-executing so that it actually does happen timely, so that we don't then have 2 weeks from the next meeting before we get to it.
That's what I was agreeing to, but if you want to go a different direction,
No, that's fine. Would that be a second, Tony?
I guess it would be.
Okay.
Second.
Rick.
I don't have anything to add. I like what Tony and Carl are thinking. I think the sooner the better.
Okay.
I mean, if we're going to do it is my thing.
Okay. So any further comments? We actually have attendees. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on this?
I think Carl wants to say something.
I just want a clarification on the timeline of self-execution if the motion passes. Is it 7 days, 10 days, 2 weeks? When do you want to adopt it? When do you want to have
Tony, it's up to you. I see 7 from Rick. Which I'll defer to you.
I thought we were talking about the first meeting in August. Carl, was that not correct?
No, that was what originally.
That's 2 weeks away. Is my math wrong? I know there's an extra Thursday in July.
That is 2 weeks.
It is
right.
2 weeks.
Okay.
Is that soon enough for you, Tony?
Well, I think Shelley makes an excellent point that, you don't want to just, or Carl too, you just don't want to spring this on people. I think, make it the rule tomorrow. But I think, Aspen moved really quickly with this because they've had some issues. These raising numbers concern me, and I appreciate the presentation. I'm sorry I missed a little bit of it. I had an emergency, but, better safe than sorry, I guess.
I guess to try to keep things moving along, I know I saw Rick said 7 days. Would that be acceptable to you, Tony?
Yes.
Okay. I think the motion is 7 days.
Paula.
But it's Jonathan's motion. I don't want to. I second.
I would agree to that.
Okay.
Paula.
What is your limit? How long?
30 days.
30 days. Yes.
And then we can readdress it then.
Yes. Well, let's have it be the second meeting of August.
To do what? To readdress it?
To readdress it if we need to.
Okay.
Paul, is that?
That was my question.
Okay with Paula, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I had my question answered. I'm just still concerned that we're kind of doing this and the community is unaware of it and there's no really opportunity for people to speak to it. So I'm concerned.
Would you be more comfortable, Paula, with 2 weeks? I'm just concerned, a lot can happen in 2 weeks. Maybe things will get better. Maybe things will get worse. I don't know.
I'm okay with my motion as it stands right now. And if it doesn't pass, I would be very open to another motion that would give the community more time. But Charlie, go ahead.
I'm 100% in favor of doing everything we can to stop the spread. I'd rather see what the security and those other things we talked about already does before we create a mask zone and something else which could create an enforcement nightmare. It isn't that I don't think we should enforce things, and I certainly voted for mandatory mask in that first meeting, and I think we ought to be continuing that. I'd rather see a little less heavy-handed thing and try the private security side that works. So even though I think it's important that we do everything we can, I'm not sure. I'm not going to support this motion.
But Charlie, you'd be open to supporting it maybe in 2 weeks.
I'd like to see how the security works in
Right,
2 weeks.
but what I'm saying in 2 weeks.
Okay, Catherine, let's call the question.
Can you restate the motion, Jonathan? I'm just a little bit confused over here in West Glenwood.
Yes, the motion is, I believe, finally, we've gotten to, it's going to be, the implementation is going to be a face mask mandatory zone in essentially the downtown core, but it's going to not be defined as, it's going to be defined as the boundaries we currently have with our downtown smoking ban. And that Carl can provide us all that, and we should have that in past areas, but it's essentially the GID-ish area. It will take effect 7 days from now, and in that time, we will use our staff, police force, and possibly private security on an education campaign. And, I'm sure we will hear from the public if the public wants to be heard. But that's the motion right now, is 7 days.
Fire on the second meeting in August unless otherwise.
And will expire the second meeting of August unless otherwise renewed. Paula, questions? Or comment?
So is this Is this ordinance? So I'm riding my bike down 7th Street to get to Veltus. I have to put my mask on, or it's only if I'm walking down 7th Street do I put my mask on? I'm just trying to get a sense of what are we really asking
Good
here?
question.
I have not been in other communities. I'm not traveling, Mason. I love telling me what to do and not. What does Mason say?
I would say to exempt commuter traffic, which would be vehicles and bikes.
But if you're driving or riding.
Yeah, so drive in a vehicle or on a commuter pass-through transportation motorcycle, no. Shelley's 49cc motor scooter.
No, that you have to wear a mask on all the time, even outside that area. Just Shelley.
Any other questions or comments?
Are we, I guess this is a question for Carl. This wasn't noticed or as an option or anything like that? Is it okay to do this under the COVID notice that we had?
You know, it probably is. You're going to get challenged on it no matter what you do, Shelley.
Right.
Would I be happier if we had it at a noticed regular meeting? Yes. Do I recognize that we just got a presentation on the numbers spiking in Garfield County and Glenwood Springs in particular?
Right.
You certainly have the authority under state statute to implement it if you want to. I was trying to get back to I was looking at tomorrow night's agenda since we're meeting again. We actually could probably well, it's not going to be 24 hours notice. Well, it probably will be. We're starting at 7 tomorrow night with a special meeting on a land use item.
Is there any exemptions, Carl, if you felt more comfortable with that, where 24 hours doesn't, I mean, at the end of the day, we are directing Deborah as our public health official to do this action. We actually do.
You haven't noticed strategies to reduce COVID-19 risk. So I'm actually okay with you guys just taking action.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to the right agenda. My apologies. And like I said, you're going to get challenged on it no matter what you do. So you might as well just get comfortable with that.
Not legally. When you say challenged, are you talking about just politically? Not you don't think that we have significant legal risk in this, correct?
I don't see a legal risk, but I do think, I mean, this is a hot issue in the country. So sure.
Right.
Catherine, let's take call.
Is that me?
Yes.
I didn't hear.
I'll say yes.
Otis?
Well, Shelley took all the drama out of it. Yes.
Yeah, she did.
Step?
No.
Hershey?
Yes.
Voorhees?
Yes.
Willman?
No.
Motion passes.
All right. Is there anything else that we want to cover under this topic this evening?
I did have a question. Are we starting at 7 o'clock tomorrow? Is that what Carl said, Mr. Mayor?
It is noticed for 7 o'clock tomorrow because I think you have the
recycling thing.
Open house tomorrow evening.
Right.
And that is on site.
That is on site. Okay.
Yes, with masks.
Next week.
And no scooters.
4-7.
And scooters.
I'm pro scooter.
I'll race you down there.
I'm riding my bike. Do I have to have a mask on?
Yes.
Not on the scooter.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order this evening? All right. We will take a 20-hour break, and we'll see each other tomorrow night, hopefully at the recycle conversation. If not, if you cannot make it, we'd have the land use decision on Bell Rippey at 7 o'clock. So that'll be fun.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.